Good evening. The May 18th, 2020 virtual meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Among other things this evening, we will hear and vote on several bills that were previously postponed due to the COVID-19 health crisis. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Pruskey?
Here.
Ms. Fiedler?
Present.
Ms. Rodvian?
Present.
Ms. Hare?
Present.
Ms. Lacy?
Present.
And I believe we may have lost Ms. Lacy.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Volky?
Present.
Ms. Pickard?
Present.
Madam Auditor?
Present.
And Ms. Schuett, Legislative Attorney.
Present.
Madam Chair, all council are present, as well as Legislative Attorney and Madam Auditor.
Thank you. Please pause at this time for the invocation led by Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let us be thankful for this day that we have been given, for its blessings, its opportunities, and its challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us to the best of our abilities through collaboration and kindness. Let us seek strength and guidance for each day's duties and problems, and be challenged to give our best always together.
Ms. Fiedler will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the Open Meetings Act statement.
The county attorney has asked that I read the following statement. The Maryland Open Meetings Act, a state law, requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. General Provisions Article Section 3102C. The virtual format of this meeting of the County Council is due to the COVID-19 emergency and is necessary in light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings, as well as the governor's various executive orders limiting public gatherings. While a virtual meeting of this type was not envisioned by the Open Meetings Act, steps have been taken to ensure that this virtual meeting includes alternate accessibility features that the Open Meetings Act Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved, such as having a phone and number that allows anyone with a telephone to call and listen to the meeting, broadcasting the meeting with video and audio on cable TV and on the web, and allowing written public comments to the legislation be filed with the clerk and considered by the council. The County Office of Law has opined that the public access provided by this technology makes this virtual meeting reasonably accessible to the public and therefore complies with the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the ethics statement.
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those who wish to testify in any form review the general information on lobbying sheet located on the Ethics website under Forms and Publications. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, please contact the Ethics Commission at 410-222-4413.
Thank you. This is Allison Pickard, Chair D2. Because this is a virtual meeting, we cannot provide reasonable seating facilities for the news media, and we cannot be physically located in Annapolis, the county seat. Therefore, may I have a motion to suspend rules 3-103 and 3-106?
Lacy, so moved.
May I have a second? May I have a second?
Rodvian, second.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to suspend Rules 3-103 and 3-106.
Mr. Pruskey,
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler,
Aye.
Ms. Hare,
Aye.
Ms. Lacy,
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Volky,
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. The motion to suspend Rules 3-103 and 3-106 is passed.
Thank you. We also cannot provide reasonable seating for the public. Furthermore, because written testimony cannot be read in its entirety into the record due to a high volume of testimony received in some cases, only the first 50 submissions will be read into the record this evening. All testimony received has been reviewed by the council members, and a summary will be posted on our website for the public to review. And the numbers in support or opposition will be announced during each public hearing. Therefore, may I also have a motion to suspend Rule 3-105?
Mr. Pruskey,
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler,
Did we approve the motion? Or do we?
No, we did not. I need a motion.
oh, my apologies.
Madam Chair, so moved. Councilman Andrew Pruskey, District 4.
And a second.
Lacy, second.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to suspend Rule 3-105.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Fiedler. Mr. Pruskey,
Aye again.
Ms. Fiedler,
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian,
Aye.
Ms. Hare,
Aye.
Ms. Lacy,
Aye.
Mr. Volky,
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. The motion to suspend Rule 3-105 is passed.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Madam Secretary, do we have any comments or communications on any subject not included in the printed agenda received from members of the public to be read into the record at this time?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Thank you. The invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda this evening? Seeing
Madam
none-
Chair,
Excuse me?
Madam Chair, Nathan Volky, District 3. Apologies because I don't pop up on the video.
No problem.
I just wanted to confirm there had been a request of 3 council members that we have an emergency legislative session on Friday, the 22nd of May at 9 a.m. I just wanted to confirm that that meeting had been set. That's obviously not on the agenda, so I was asking that it be placed on the agenda if we need to discuss it.
That meeting has been set and all council members have been informed of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill or resolution or minutes constitutes the reading of a whole?
So moved, Councilman Andrew Pruskey, District 4.
And a second?
Second, Lacy, District 1.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the motion carries. Madam Secretary, please read the minutes of May 11th, May 12th, May 13th, and May 14th, 2020.
May 11, 2020. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Allison Pickard at 7 p.m. Mr. Volky asked those listening to pause to remember those lost and those still fighting during the pandemic and thanked frontline workers. He then led a prayer of blessing and positivity, followed by Ms. Fiedler leading the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar. May 12, 2020. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Allison Pickard at 1 p.m. Mr. Pruskey offered a prayer, followed by Ms. Fiedler leading the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar. May 13, 2020. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Allison Pickard at 9 a.m. Ms. Fiedler acknowledged the loss of moments in life due to the virus, followed by Ms. Fiedler leading the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar. May 14, 2020. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Allison Pickard at 9 a.m. as Ravi shared words of wisdom, followed by Ms. Fiedler leading the Pledge of Allegiance. The meeting was held remotely via Zoom webinar.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th, 2020?
Rod Van, so moved.
May I have a second?
Lacy, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing no opposition, the motion carries. The minutes of May 11th, May 12th, May 13th, May 14th, 2020 stand approved as read. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 3920, an emergency ordinance concerning current expense budget, fourth quarter fund transfer, and supplementary appropriations. Bill number 4020, an ordinance concerning Anne Arundel County Consolidated Plan fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2025. Bill number 4120, an emergency ordinance concerning proclamation of civil emergency in Anne Arundel County.
Thank you. Allison Pickard, Chair, D2. Madam Secretary, please read the titles of any resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 1620, resolution urging the county executive to reopen Anne Arundel County.
Thank you. At this time, we will now hold a public hearing on the constant yield tax rate. I would like to welcome Mr. Jim Beecham, our budget director, who will be opening this conversation with us today. We'll pause for a moment as he's brought forward into the meeting. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the County Council. For the record, my name is Jim Beecham. I'm Budget Officer for Anne Arundel County. If you'll please bear with me while I read prepared text. Thank you for the opportunity to kick off tonight's FY 2021 constant yield property tax rate hearing. Section 2-205 of the property tax article of the Annotated Code of Maryland requires the State Department of Assessments and Taxation to certify to all taxing authorities a constant yield property tax rate, which will produce the same revenue in the coming year, which was produced in the prior taxable year, exclusive of new construction. The law further provides that if the taxing authority intends to establish a tax rate greater than the constant yield tax rate, it must advertise and hold a public hearing. An advertisement was placed by this county council in the local newspaper, which adheres to the procedures required by state law and was reviewed and approved by the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. Anne Arundel County's constant yield tax rate per $100 of taxable for FY 2021 are certified by the State Department of Assessments and Taxation as follows. 92.66 cents for the county, excluding Annapolis and Highland Beach, 55.35 cents for Annapolis, and 90.23 cents for Highland Beach. The FY 2021 proposed budget decreases the real property tax rate from 93.5 cents to 93.4 cents per $100 of assessment for the county, excluding the city of Annapolis and Highland Beach. This rate is 0.8% higher than the constant yield rate of 92.66 cents and will generate $5.3 million in additional property tax revenues above the constant yield amount. Additionally, the FY 2021 county tax rate applicable to the city of Annapolis real property is similarly decreased from 56.1 cents to 56.0 cents per $100 assessment in the proposed budget. The rate is 3% higher than the constant yield rate of 54.35 cents and will generate $1.1 million in additional property tax revenues above the constant yield amount. Finally, for the Highland Beach, FY 2021 county real property tax rate has decreased from 90.5 cents to 90.4 cents per $100 of assessment in the proposed budget. This proposed rate is 0.2% more than the constant yield rate of 90.23 cents and will generate $552 more in property taxes than the constant yield amount. As required by law, this public hearing has been scheduled. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Excuse me. To see that our colleague has joined us today via video, so wonderful. Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. Mr. Beecham, I just want to make sure I understand. I do not have a strong understanding of this, so help me make sure. Despite the fact that, let me back up. There are 3 areas in the county that are reassessed every year for property values. Is that correct?
There's one of 3 areas that are reassessed each year in a 3-year rotation.
Okay, perfect. And so this year was area 2, is that correct?
I'm not exactly sure which area, but okay.
Okay, so do I understand correctly that if those assessments went up, despite the fact that the county executive's budget has kept the tax rate roughly equal to what it was last year, people will still pay more in property taxes by virtue of their assessments going up? Is that right?
That will vary property by property depending on their change in assessed value. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so certainly some people will still they will still see their tax bill increase as a result, and that's why we're having this intent to exceed the constant yield public hearing. Is that right?
Well, those are 2 different facts. They're both true, but they're not necessarily directly connected. Yes, some property owners will see their property tax bill increase even with a lower tax rate.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate
yes,
that.
Ma'am.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Beecham at this time? Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volky, District 3. Mr. Beecham, so just following up on questions from Councilwoman Hare, in terms of County Council approving a rate that would be the constant yield, if we were to find $5.3 million of savings in this budget and then take the property tax rate to 0.9266, that would actually ensure that tax rates for everyone in the county stayed the same across the board. Am I correct?
Well, there are 3 different jurisdictional calculations: the city of Annapolis, the city of Highland Beach, and the county exclusive of those 2 municipalities.
Okay, so taking those 2 municipalities out, but for the county, if the rate was 0.9266, then everyone in the county exclusive of the city of Annapolis and Highland Beach would pay the same amount in taxes this year as they paid last year if we could get the rate to 0.9266.
Well, the constant yield calculates in aggregate, so all properties. There will be differences in the rates of change in appraised value on a property by property basis. So that would impact what each individual's impact would be.
Okay, I guess I'm just trying to get at how can we get as close as possible to the same amount that people paid in taxes last year as they paid this year? And I think where I'm going with it is the right place, and I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. If we get
well, there's really no good way to ensure that that would happen on every property in the county.
Okay, well, what would be the closest way to do it?
Probably the suggestion you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Pruskey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Andrew Pruskey, District 4. I think this is the 6th year I've heard the hearing on the constant rate. And Mr. Beecham, just to help my colleagues so they understand, it's possible that someone's property value may go down and they may be paying lower taxes. It's obviously, there's a lot of factors that go in, but your area, depending on, certain factors, the things that happen. So what you were saying about not only the 3 jurisdictions, but your home value. Obviously, if somebody's adding on an addition or they don't take care of their property, it depreciates. So it could go either way, just so everyone understands that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that also helps kind of understand the way the rate is set and and how you were saying it's a little complicated. You may help one person on one end, but on the back end, it's a little more difficult. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Beecham at this time? Thank you, Mr. Beecham. The County Council will set the property tax rate for Anne Arundel County, the City of Annapolis, and the Town of Highland Beach at a meeting beginning at 9 a.m. on Friday, June 12th, 2020. The rate may exceed the constant yield tax rate. We will now open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony received from members of the public to be read into the record this evening?
No, Madam Chair, we do not.
Oh, thank you. With that, the public hearing is now closed. We will proceed with our meeting. Did someone want to make a motion? Never mind. Okay, let's move on. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1320.
Bill number 1320, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget and zoning, commercial revitalization area program, designation of a commercial revitalization area in Arundel in Glen Burnie, Maryland.
This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. I'm actually the sponsor of this bill. This concept of creating commercial revitalization areas is, I believe we currently have 9 in the county. And this evening, I will be presenting 2 bills that introduce 2 new areas. One, which is mentioned in Bill 1320, and there's a map, is in the area of the Arundel Plaza. And creating a commercial revitalization area allows for property owners to potentially qualify for a property tax credit when they improve their property, whether it can be an incremental increase in real property tax assessment for improvements of at least $100,000. They can qualify to new construction, demolition construction, and or rehabilitation of the existing property are eligible. If those of you who are familiar with Arundel will know that it is actually one of the very first malls, indoor malls, that was created in the 60s. John F. Kennedy actually opened the mall with a ribbon cutting, which is a pretty cool thing for Glen Burnie. But in years since, in the last 20 years or so, we've seen that area have a revolving door of retail. We are looking forward to revitalization in the Glen Burnie area, and this is a very small step, which we hope will act as a stimulus to work towards the vision laid out in the 2004 small area plan and to help reduce the number of vacant commercial properties in this area and promote redevelopment. As I said, that's a simple first step. And I would urge my colleagues to support the revitalization of Glen Burnie. With that, I will turn to Mr. Barron to see if he would like to respond for the administration.
And Madam Chair, my apologies for interrupting. We need to ask Ms. Miller. She is totally blocked because she's in the middle of her screen. She needs to move all the way over towards where the light is.
Well done,
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barron?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the council. For the record, Pete Barron with the administration. Joining me is the now properly seated Ms. Miller from OPZ. from EDC, Ms. Keisha Haith, and from Law, Ms. Lori Blair Klausmeyer. I believe there will be an amendment to this bill coming up. So, oh no, wrong one. Okay. The administration appreciates working with the sponsor, the work that OPZ and EDC did to help spur some revitalization. So with that, the administration supports this bill.
Thank you. And I would just add, Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2, that it has been my pleasure to work with both Planning and Zoning, with Ms. Miller and Ms. Haith from Economic Development, to craft these two maps, the one that you'll also come next in Bill 1420. We have a lot of work to do as far as revitalization, but this is, again, a simple step. So thank you so much for all your support in crafting these two mapped areas. Are there any questions from my colleagues regarding Bill 1320? Ms. Smith, Madam Auditor?
Hi, I just wanted to go on the record. This is Susan Smith, County Auditor. In my blue letter, I had said the tax credits are for 5 years, and I just wanted to go on the record to say if they put in private funds of at least 10 million, it is 10 years.
Thank you for that correction. Any other further discussion? Okay, we will now open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony on Bill 1320 received from members of the public to report this evening?
No, Madam Chair, no submissions.
Thank you. The public hearing on Bill number 1320 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1320.
Bill number 1320, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget and zoning, commercial revitalization area program, designation of a commercial revitalization area in Arundel and Glen Burnie, Maryland.
This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 1320.
Mr. Pruskey.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Mr. Volky.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 1320 is passed.
Thank you very much. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nathan Volky, District 3. We didn't do it a moment ago, but I do want to make a motion to suspend Rule 5-106B to allow the resolution that was introduced this evening to be voted on tonight rather than 7 days after its introduction date. But I would ask that as part of this motion, it be held to be the last thing on the agenda for this evening.
Is there a second?
Second, Fiedler, District 5.
Madam Secretary, please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules and hear Resolution 1620 later this evening. I butchered that motion.
Madam Chair, I believe the motion is to suspend the rules to hear and vote on Resolution 1620 at the end of the meeting. And I shall call the roll on that motion. Mr. Presski.
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler.
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian.
Aye.
Ms. Hare.
Aye.
Excuse me.
Aye.
Ms. Lacy.
Aye.
Mr. Volky.
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. The motion to hear and vote on Resolution 1620, suspend the rules to hear and vote on Resolution 1620 at the end of the meeting is passed.
Thank you. We'll get now back to our regularly scheduled programming. This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1420.
Bill number 1420, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and Budget and Zoning, Commercial Revitalization Area Program, designation of a commercial revitalization area in Marley and Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Again, this is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. This is also my legislation. It's the same concept that was discussed in Bill 1320. However, the map is different and it entails the area of the Ritchie Highway corridor that encapsulates Marley Station Mall and some other commercial properties. You've all received it with the bill. Just there is an amendment because of one small parcel was inadvertently left out, but we'll get to that in a moment when the map was drafted. Does the administration want to weigh in again?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Pete Barron with the administration. Joining me at the virtual table again are Ms. Lynn Miller from OPZ, Ms. Keisha Haith from Economic Development, and from Law, Ms. Lori Blair Klausmeyer. Yeah, ditto to my previous testimony, now with the amendment as well. Appreciate the sponsors coordinating and working with our experts, Ms. Haith and Ms. Miller. Thank you.
Thank you again. I will add that when your property is in a commercial revitalization area, it's basically a tool that you have. It's nothing you actually have to utilize, but it is a nice financial incentive. I'm hoping that this, along with future revitalization legislation, brings about pretty significant change to these corridors, old commercial corridors in the Glen Burnie area. But commercial revitalization areas are just one stimulus tool. So thank you again to Ms. Miller and Economic Development, Keisha, Ms. Haith, for supporting the efforts to map these areas. Do my colleagues have any questions at this time? Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a brief question. I noticed that on the map, you had taken a portion of the area that abuts the, looked like the Marley Station Mall out. I guess it was the Marley Ritchie properties, I want to say, where the old Shell station is there across from what once was a Pearl Express, but I think, and a Boston Market. I'm not sure if it is still. Anyway, I guess my question to you was, what was the reason for taking that out? I'm not opposed to it. I just was curious.
I actually believe there was a property left off the original map, which we have an amendment to add it back on. That vacant property.
I guess I read that the wrong way. I thought it was taking it out, but good.
No, we're adding it in because of the way the map looks and the highway exchange, it was just inadvertently left out. Good. And after the bill was introduced, actually someone in the community called me and pointed it out, and we were like, oh, that's the prime property that we would like to see redeveloped. So that's why we'll amend it tonight.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now open the public hearing on Bill 1420. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony on Bill 1420 received from members of the public to report this evening?
No, Madam Chairman, there were no submissions.
Thank you. The public hearing on Bill number 1420 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1420.
Bill number 1420, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget and zoning, commercial revitalization area program, designation of a commercial revitalization area in Marley and Glen Burnie, Maryland.
Is there any further discussion at this time? Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Madam Chair, I'm going to give it a beat to see if this is something that will be coming up on screen. Okay, the amendment is now being seen on screen. Amendment number 1. This amendment adds a parcel to the proposed commercial revitalization area and replaces Exhibit A with Exhibit A1 to reflect the addition.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt?
So move, Councilman Andrew Pruskey, District 4.
May I have a second?
Second, Councilwoman Rodvian, District 6.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Mr. Pruskey,
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler,
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian,
Apologies, I'm having unmute issues. Aye.
Ms. Hare,
Aye.
Ms. Lacy,
Aye.
Mr. Volky,
Aye.
Ms. Pickard.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you. Bill number 1420, as amended, will be heard on June 1st, 2020. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 1620.
Bill number 1620, an ordinance concerning zoning residential districts, community-based assisted living facilities 1 and 2, group homes 1 and 2, recovery residences 1 and 2, and rooming houses.
Thank you. Bill 1620 is sponsored by Mr. Volky. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to just say to everybody who is here to hear the resolution in a little while, we probably have a bit of testimony on this one because this has been an equally spirited debate on this particular bill. So I just want to apologize in advance and please stick with us. With that said, this bill is the result of a little over a year, year and a half of work to try to get to a place to solve a situation that has arisen in the county. And specifically, the situation is the creation of certain types of commercial facilities operating in residential districts. And to the extent that they're operating in those districts and they are more or less forming campuses as opposed to what they were intended to be, which is individual residences in communities, it has created a situation where the original intent of some of the good-natured legislation that created them is not necessarily being fulfilled. So I do want to start off by saying that I've received a lot of testimony for and against this legislation, and I've reviewed every piece. In fact, I've responded to a number of people who have contacted me both in the recovery community as well as in the assisted living facilities community and the group homes community in an effort to try to answer questions and concerns that they may have. I have met with individuals from those communities as well, where they have asked and reached out to me. I know that there are some folks who I gave my information to, and I would love to still talk with you to try to work together on this legislation. But there are a number of things that I've heard about this legislation that I just want to clear up. So one is that it's prima facie discriminatory. I expect there will be some questions for the Office of Law on this, but I can tell you that having read cases from around the country, as well as discussed it with our legal counsel, Ms. Schuett, and Mr. Swain, I feel confident that we've crafted a bill that respects the Fair Housing Act, both at the federal and state and county levels, sufficient that it will ensure that it is not a discriminatory action toward anyone who is an owner of a group home, an assisted living facility, or a recovery residence. So I feel confident in that. Additionally, the requirements of this bill are relatively limited in the scope of what is being introduced. First, there is a bifurcation of these types of facilities. So first, you have the 1 to 8 bed facilities, and those are called Group 1. And then you have the 9 to 16 facilities, which are called Group 2. The reason that that line was chosen at 1 to 8 versus 9 to 16 is because when you start to get 9 people in the same house living there, there becomes significant life safety concerns. And those concerns need to be addressed to ensure that everyone living there is living safely. So that was the reason for that figure being adapted or chosen. From there, the only requirements that are placed are on what are known as the Category 2 facilities. So the Category 1 facilities are treated identically as any other single-family home in this county. Nothing is different about them. The Category 2 facilities do have minor requirements for where they can be located and how they can be operated. Specifically, there's a requirement that they all be certified at the state level. So that includes recovery homes, group homes, and assisted living facilities. Currently, there is no requirement in our code that recovery homes be certified at the state level. So this is going to introduce that certification requirement. And frankly, I've heard from a number of people who have been through recovery programs in the county who have indicated that a certification for a recovery home is really important because it ensures that the services being received by the residents there are up to par and they're good quality services. So we want to make sure that we're offering that for our residents. Additionally, for these Category 2 homes, there is a restriction on allowing 2 of the Category 2 homes to be next to one another if they are owned by the same person or the same person has financial ties with the person owning the other one. So the intention is basically, again, to avoid these campus-like settings that we've been seeing in our county. Effectively, what this bill does, and where I know some of the people who like it but think it doesn't go far enough, it still allows, is that you could own a recovery home 1 and it could be in between 2 recovery home 2s that you own. And that still allows somewhat for this campus structure to arise. However, the intention is to try to stay as far away from institutionalization as possible. That's been something that's been a goal for decades, to try to get away from institutionalization. Those are the requirements that this bill would add. There are also some concerns that I've heard from individuals about current facilities that are operating that may no longer be able to operate if this bill is passed. I just want to assuage anyone's fears that I've talked extensively with the Office of Law, and in fact, there is not going to be a problem with existing facilities continuing to operate, even if they cannot meet the requirements of this new bill. For instance, if there are 2 16-bed facilities next to each other and someone owns both, or I know of a particular instance where there are 2 9-bed facilities next to each other. Nothing about this bill is going to stop those recovery residences or assisted living facilities or anything else from operating as they currently operate. They will become what's known as a non-conforming use, but they are still allowed to operate. They will not be shut down. And as long as they continue operating in their current state, there will be no interruption of services, and they'll continue to be able to provide strong service to the recovery community, to the elderly community as it pertains to assisted living facilities, and to the disability community with the group homes. So all of that is a general overview of this bill. And I believe that it is extremely well crafted to try to touch on a small issue and regulate something that was not foreseen. At least it doesn't seem like it was foreseen at the time that these original bills were passed. So with that, I appreciate everyone listening. I thank you for all those who've contacted in support of this. And I thank you to everyone who has recognized the concern that these campus-like sort of facilities growing up in the community, how they are potentially to what was intended in terms of ensuring that people in recovery homes or assisted living community-based facilities or in group homes are able to get back into the community, because this keeps them away from that. So thank you.
Mrs. Allison Pickard, Chair D2. Mr. Barron, would the administration like to respond?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe I'll be having a few people come to the virtual table with me. Ms. Lori Rhodes from Office of Planning and Zoning, and Mr. Greg Swain from the Office of Law. We also have a number of people in the virtual audience, including our Director of OPC, Mr. Kai Ziegler, from our Mental Health Agency, Ms. Adrienne Meckler, and Ms. Catherine Ray, from Aging and Disabilities, Ms. Pam Jordan, our Director, and Ms. Jennifer Jackson, Ms. Sarah Sine, and Ms. Joelle Ridgway, all from Aging and Disabilities. So first, again, for the record, if I didn't say my name, for those listening, Pete Barron with the administration. Administration recognizes there are the concerns that Mr. Volky outlined with this, with these types of facilities that this bill is targeting. We understand that the sponsor has attempted to address several of the concerns that were raised in his previous attempt. However, despite those efforts, the administration finds this bill before you now and the effort that brought it here insufficient for the reasons I will outline in a moment. If the council wants to make a political statement with this bill to say that we have taken these facilities on and done something, we should pass this bill. If the council wants to craft good policy, we recommend you go back to the drawing board and bring together all parties to fully examine the differences in the regulatory structures, the different types of community-based facilities this bill is addressing must operate under, how their business models work, examine the data and what the true extent of these facilities that exist in this county, balance the competing interests in land use with tackling the opioid crisis, helping those with mental illness heal, and providing care to the disabled and the elderly. So with that, at this time, the administration cannot support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the council for the sponsor? Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Less a question than just sort of a comment and a response. I think that I expect tonight I'm going to hear a lot about how things I do are political statements or political stunts. So I'm waiting to continue to hear that line of sort of discussion this evening. I've heard it quite a lot with respect to something else we're going to tackle later tonight, but I would appreciate it if we could try to focus this on policy, because the reality is this is about policy and it has been crafted. And I did meet with the departments prior to putting this bill together. To be clear, I met with Office of Planning and Zoning. I met with the Office of Aging and Disabilities, the Department of Aging and Disabilities. I met with Office of Law extensively. So in the discussion, I would appreciate if we could focus on policy as opposed to sort of the shots about political and rhetoric and things like that. Thank you.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I have seen some concerns from members of the community regarding septic and 14-bed facilities and numerous 14-bed facilities being together on potentially one septic. Is that a concern? Is planning and zoning involved with any of that? And could you weigh in?
I'll ask Ms. Lori Rhodes to speak to that issue.
Good evening,
yes.
Lori Rhodes, Assistant Planning and Zoning Officer, Planning and Zoning. That question would be directed to the Health Department, who oversees the septic and sewer issues. That was not brought to my attention because I would have reached out to that agency for comment, but that's not something I could speak on.
Thank you.
We did, this is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. We did receive lots of testimony regarding that concern from constituents, particularly in the Gibson Island area. I've found it interesting in that the entire Gibson Island country club, golf course, yacht club, restaurant is all on septic. So I'm not sure that 9 or 10 elderly residents living in a home on a septic is any different than a country club, but I mean, we can debate septic, it's not my expertise. But I don't think we regulate folks, that entire area of the Mountain Road, Pasadena, Gibson Island area is on septic, but I don't think we regulate how many people can live in a single family home based on their septic system, correct?
The health department would have to speak to that. The capacity of the system depends on the number of rooms that are in the structure, but that's not my area of expertise, so I wouldn't want to go there. But they set a limit on square footage and the number of rooms that a house can have based on the capacity of the system.
So Allison Pickard again, Chair D2. So if someone was renovating a home or creating a supportive housing situation in a community that has septic, they would have to demonstrate that the septic had the capacity.
Yes,
Again, I know it's a health department issue.
that would be part of the health department review for the permit before the permit could be issued.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Again, this is Allison Pickard. So I gather the country club that's well within the critical area and on septic is managing their septic load by an adequate septic system as well.
I would presume, Lori Rhodes, Assistant Planning and Zoning Officer, I would presume they do.
Okay.
We have not been aware of any complaints regarding that property.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to make sure that I keep the record straight, we did actually, our little work group, when we were putting together this bill with the departments I mentioned, we did discuss sending it to the health department. I had thought that a copy of this was sent to the health department. I never heard comments back. So I can't verify that independently, but I think that we had tried. I also want to point out that at least as far as I'm aware, I think Gibson Island is not actually on septic. I thought they had their own water treatment plant. So I just want to be clear about that. I would need to talk to somebody over there, and I don't have them on speed dial, so I don't have an answer for you on that one. And as it pertains to the discussion of septic and these concerns, I guess what's interesting to me is I had thought that generally under the Plan Maryland guidance and what we had done under the O'Malley administration in Maryland and then continuing thereafter, that a lot of the effort was to try to move folks off of septic. I thought that's why a major line item in our budget is to help do septic to sewer conversions, and why we're trying to avoid having continued septic system problems in the county. So I guess I'm sort of a little floored when I hear Office of Planning and Zoning come in and talk about how septic is great and everything's working fine, because that had been a major issue over the past 10 years or so that I've heard about. So I just want to make that point. I also want to add that in terms of the guidance or what the departments are looking at, there was a memo that was issued internally by the county within the last 6 or 8 months that is actually looking at these facilities a little more carefully to ensure that they are not causing problems in terms of nitrogen loads and EDUs and the life safety issues that I brought up. So it is a legitimate problem that the county has even recognized internally, and they've done a memo on that, and it's out there. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that this is not, some problem that's looking for, or should I say, this is not a solution that's looking for a problem. This is a legitimate concern that even the county administration has acknowledged up until this point.
Thank you. Ms. Fiedler. Oh, excuse me. Ms. Fiedler.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And just for the record, my question was truly a question. I want to thank Ms. Rhodes for answering it without directly answering it, but coming back to the virtual table to answer it. Certainly didn't want to call out any specific neighborhood or community. I just had a question on the email that I got, and I appreciate the answer, Ms. Rhodes.
Ms. Schuett legal counsel had a question.
I actually wanted to circle back to what you, Ms. Chairman, said, and that is, if you have every septic system that, especially a new one, needs to go through the health department and be adequate. That's a given. But if you're building a house and you're going to have your kids and their kids and your grandchildren live there, so that you say have 10 or 11 people living in the house, you can be on septic. And so that same requirement or permission to be on septic is true with respect to this bill. If you have a house that you're building for 9 people who are disabled or who need assisted living care, that is acceptable so long as the system is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Volky.
One thing I needed to correct, Madam Chair, I said something about the septic on Gibson Island, and then someone watching texted me. They are all on septic. They have public water. So I just want to ensure, for sake of the discourse, that I'm being honest about what we're saying. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you. I wasn't going to get into it with you. Do we have any other questions for the sponsor or the administration regarding Bill 1620? We will now, seeing no questions, we will now open the public hearing. Madam Secretary, do we have any testimony on Bill 1620 received from members of the public to report this evening?
Yes, Madam Chairman, we have received 83 submissions of written testimony on Bill 1620, all of which have been reviewed by council members and will be posted on our website for public viewing. Of the testimony received, 53 were in opposition to Bill 1620, 30 were in support of Bill number 1620, and I will read the first 50 submissions we received. And in advance, I will tell you there were a few submissions that were extremely long, and for those few, I will actually be using a timer to stick to 2 minutes. Henry Hopkins, 1746 Banbury Road, Gibson Island, support. I've lived on Gibson Island on and off for over 67 years. My wife Nancy and I feel very strongly that Bill 1620 must be adopted to curtail the concentration of group homes in residential settings in Anne Arundel County. Windmill Point, the community just off Gibson Island, currently has a completed assisted living facility on septic with 13 independent bathrooms, not to mention the kitchen facility. An additional unit is under construction 1 house away, with plans to purchase the home in the middle between the two. There is also a potential for another 40 beds on Eagle Creek and Red House Cove. Both facilities are in the Chesapeake Bay's critical area footprint and on septic. As you may know, we have traces of drugs in our creeks and bay brought on by overburdened septic systems. The same developer is converting an existing house on Gibson Island, 1753 Banbury Road, into a 9-bedroom assisted living facility without any upgrade to the facility's septic system, a clear danger to the bad. Chris Pedersen, 1394 Red River Mist Court, Stony Beach, oppose. My name is Chris and I am many things. I'm a father, son, brother, friend, the senior vice president of a company, tax-paying resident of Anne Arundel County, a person in recovery, and most importantly for this platform, I'm the direct result of a recovery residence. I'm the product of one of the recovery residences that wouldn't have been able to exist under this bill because it was a conjoining property. Being part of a community within a community made me eventually feel comfortable in the greater community as well, because we need to feel supported from our community. When I came into recovery and moved into a recovery residence, I felt so excluded by my own doing from the rest of the world. I was able to move in and learn how to live as a family with neighbors that understood other productive members of society. I think of being a groomsman at multiple weddings of family I gained there. I also can't help but to think none of us would have had this chance if just one more variable was different in our stories. I couldn't imagine this passing and knowing during an epidemic, we as a community are allowing resources to be limited the way this bill will. Please reconsider. Michael Calisano, 487 Side Drive, Severna Park, oppose. Angel Trainer, 13 Silverwood Circle, number 4, Annapolis, oppose. Serenity Sisters opposes Anne Arundel County Council Bill 1620. Bill 1620 proposes to create 2 categories of community-based assisted living facilities, group home and recovery residences. Those with 8 residents or less, recovery residences, are permitted uses in all residential zoning districts. Those between 9 and 16 residences, recovery residences too, RA conditional use in all residential zoning districts, conditioned that the owner of the facility may not own two facilities that adjoin each other, and if owned by a business entity, the owner, the owner's family, and the owner's business associates may not have an interest, financial or otherwise, in the business entity. To be mentioned, Serenity Sisters provides state-certified sober living housing in Anne Arundel County for individuals seeking structure and support in a healthy living environment following treatment for addiction. Each home is monitored by a house manager. As part of their operational procedures, all medication is kept secured in a lockbox. Any discontinued or unused medication is properly disposed of at the nearest police station. Bill 1620 is unnecessary because certification of recovery residence was established by House Bill 1411 entitled Health Recovery Residences Certification, which was enacted under Article 217C of the Maryland Constitution on May 28, 2016, and became effective on October 1st, 2016. The Maryland Department of Health is required to approve a credentialing entity to develop and administer a certification process for recovery residences. This Behavioral Health Administration, BHA, was approved by the department to serve as the designated credentialing entity. Bill 1620 may have unintended consequences. With a restriction to the number of residences permitted, there may be an increased need for new recovery residences. The number of, I will finish the sentence. Increased need for new recovery residences as the number of people seeking recovery housing will stay the same. However, the current number of homes will no longer meet the need. And the next one also requires timer. Charles J. Nymphos, 5174 Mountain Road, Pasadena. Support. Council members. My name is Charles Nymphos. I am the director of the Windmill Point Neighbor Association, which is on the Mountain Road Peninsula leading to Gibson Island. In addition, to further explain my background, I'm 73 years old, disabled veteran, Vietnam veteran, and former 15-year owner of 2 assisted living facilities in Baltimore County. Currently, I am commissioner on the Sport Fishing Commission Advisory Board to the DNR. First, as I hope you will undoubtedly conclude from the foregoing, the Windmill Point Neighbor Association nor I are prejudiced to the elderly or disabled. Quite the contrary, as Mr. Andy Levy's memorandum to the county attorney would have you believe. Mr. Levy simply used the begs the question ploy, prejudicing baiting to justify his client's development of a 13-bed, 13-bath and commercial kitchen on a creek with septic and well. This development on a 0.6-acre lot of 5,000 square foot facility with wraparound decks. The original bill 2315 did not consider the campus type facilities which have been developed in the county that completely circumvents the original county code for larger assisted living facilities. The environmental impact of a campus type compound with 35 to 40 beds within 200 feet of a creek, less than 1,000 feet of the Chesapeake Bay on well and septic is catastrophic. As you know, most, if not all, the residents of the facility are on several medications. The bay and tributaries are already showing trace pharmaceuticals, which has caused dual gender implications according to DNR and University of Maryland studies. The health and safety of the residents along the bay and its tributaries is threatened by these campus-assisted living developments. Building these facilities, which exit onto state roads without county coordination with MDOT, is a travesty to the safety of AA County residences, and in my opinion, illegal. In closing, having been an owner of, I will finish the sentence. In closing, having been an owner of assisted living facilities for 15 years, it boggles my mind how and why the council would pass a bill 1523, which violates the rights of citizens that have lived in residential setting, many of which are elderly and some of whom are also disabled, which is so detrimental to the safety, health, and well-being of the very people in the county it purports to assist. Jeff Kane, P.O. Box 7, Gibson Island, support. My wife and I are longtime residents of Anne Arundel County, and I am writing to you today to support the passage of Anne Arundel Bill 2016. The community assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions, but they must adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of the residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the bay and its critical areas. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to the lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. The bill seeks to differentiate between small and large facilities that can be sited on residentially zoned properties and would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. The bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large campus facilities, which allow developers to skirt rules designed to residential neighborhoods by introducing large commercial operations of high-density housing, such as is occurring at Windmill Point at the end of Mountain Road, Route 177. Thank you for your consideration of my point of view. Roger Riley, 8350 Woodland Road, Millersville, opposed. I am the owner of 8350 Woodland Road. I purchased the property in 2018 to provide residential crisis services to county residents who have experienced a recent psychiatric crisis. Our work has saved many lives and protected the most vulnerable among us. The program is licensed by the state of Maryland and accredited by the Joint Commission. We are a short-term program which helps individuals stabilize and move back to their communities where they can thrive. Passing this bill closes this program and closes the door on our county residents who are in crisis and need of our help. Sylvia Graff Jones, 1265 Doubleday Drive, Arnold, oppose. Alyssa Shaw, 1013 Kensington Way, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Thomas Uhas, 5133 Mountain Road, Pasadena, support. Current county zoning code allows redevelopment of any residential property into a group home or a community-based assisted living facility with no provisions or conditions. Further, the county allows developers to purchase and redevelop adjoining residences to construct campus environments of high-density housing, allowing them to skirt the rules pertaining to large facilities. The county's position is that these redevelopments are consistent with residential use. But in my 50-plus years of living in residential communities, none of my neighbors have ever had large delivery trucks regularly dropping off food and paper products, large trucks regularly delivering fresh linens, front-loader garbage trucks loudly emptying dumpsters in the early morning, hazardous biomedical waste pickups, the capability of flushing 17 or more toilets into a single septic system, a parking lot for residents, visitors, and staff, 64 square feet lighted signs advertising their location, tenants signing contracts to rent individual rooms. Clearly, these facilities do not operate in a manner consistent with residential use. Rather than go through the process to rezone neighborhoods as mixed use, the county has decided they will grant privileges to certain developers to redevelop neighborhood properties wherever they see fit, and the neighborhood, the very people officials have sworn to represent, can do nothing about it. It is time for the county to begin to act responsibly. Please support Bill 1620 to address this developer loophole and begin the process of returning some common sense provisions to our zoning code. Ashley Hesegard, 1622 Woodtree Court, Annapolis, opposed. Jacqueline Sweeney, 4 Wellington Place, Annapolis, opposed. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state-certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Leslie Beers, 4 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Brooke Morrison, 4 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Jennifer Twyford, for Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Christy Backey, 4 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residence within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill, may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Jennifer O'Neill, 3 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Jocelyn Sturgis, 3 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Amanda Halleck, 6152 Drum Point Road, Deal. Oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Carly L. Jacobs, 3 Wellington Place, Annapolis, oppose. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Bonnie Staves, 3 Wellington Place, Annapolis, opposed. As a constituent, I have concerns as to how this bill would impact the operation of the current state certified recovery residences within Anne Arundel County. I can certainly appreciate what the councilman is attempting to accomplish. However, the current language in the bill would have harmful consequences to the already successfully established recovery residences in the county. It is our fear that moving forward with this bill may result in the opening of new uncertified recovery residences. Anthony Murray Lee, 601 Broadwater Way, Gibson Island, support. This bill fixes some serious zoning and neighborhood impact issues. There are too many loopholes that this bill will help fix. I would appreciate your passing Bill 1620. Denver Stanner, 295 Riverdale Drive, Pasadena. I am a longtime resident of Anne Arundel County. I'm a longtime resident of Anne Arundel County, and I'm writing to you today to support the passage of Anne Arundel Bill 1620. Community-assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions, but they must adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of the residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the Bay and its critical areas. Bill 1620 group homes in residential neighborhoods. Rick Edmonds, 1804 Skippers Row, Gibson Island, support. I have been shocked by how easy it is for an owner of an assisted living facility to buy a single home and then expand into a full compound. It would have seemed logical that such an approach ensured the owners followed some basic rules comparable to larger facilities, given the combined property covered dozens of beds together. Needless to say, I was surprised to find out that AA County did not have comparable requirements to other counties for items such as parking, restrictions on size in the neighborhood, etc. I'm appalled that we as a community allow for-profit owners to essentially use a loophole to deliver superior personal investment returns while the guidelines for residents and neighbors are skirted. Please approve Bill 1620 so we can properly manage. Kathleen Kuklinski, 544 Broadwater Road, Arnold, support. I believe we need more provisions placed on the current law allowing high-density housing in a residential environment with little to no regard to existing environmental rules, especially septic. I would have this proposed bill even stronger than it is, but it is a good start. Paul W. Landinson, 652 Stillwater Road, Gibson Island, support. As a 20-year Anne Arundel County homeowner, I support passage of Anne Arundel Bill 1620. Although community-assisted living facilities are necessary, they must adhere to community guidelines protecting the character of our residential neighborhoods and adhere to environmental laws and regulations protecting the Bay and critical areas. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods, differentiating between small and large facilities that can be sited on residentially zoned properties. It would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. Dr. Randy Davis, 1719 Purdy Point Road, Gibson Island. Apologies, this is another one that requires timer. Support. My family, including Meredith Davis and Eric Davis, have been residents of Anne Arundel County and Gibson Island, Maryland for over 35 years. We are writing this correspondence to specifically suggest that Bill 1620 must be adopted to curtail and control the concentration of group homes in residential settings in Anne Arundel County. As a physician, I also believe that assisted living facilities in the appropriate setting are an asset to our communities. Our family has a specific history with assisted living facilities, and that after my father lived with me for a number of years, he eventually broke his hip and he resided at such a facility in Millersville for several years before his death. He was well taken care of by a 24/7 staff that arrived at all hours of the day and night to park in a large commercial parking lot in a well-lighted setting. The facility had multiple parking spaces to allow for visits from family without significant restrictions. That is absolutely not the case in a location that is planned, such as on Gibson Island at 1735 Banbury Road. The house is a classic residential location with a small driveway and only a few parking spots. Access to the location is on a narrow road where people routinely have to pull off the road if two vehicles are approaching from different directions. Although the developer is apparently now trying to increase the number of parking locations, it is extremely unlikely that there will be enough locations to accommodate a full staff and multiple visitors for a planned 9-bedroom assisted living facility. Assisted living facilities in general, unfortunately, have a significant turnover of staff who would have to arrive and leave at different times during a 24-hour period. The arrival of unfamiliar guests and employees at any hour poses a significant risk on a small, narrow road to the prospective employees and residents. The house is simply not suitable for conversion to a group home. I specifically do not live near the proposed location, but also have grave concerns about the environmental impact. So, JW Raider, 712 Stillwater Road, Gibson Island, support. I'm a longtime homeowner and now a resident of Anne Arundel County, and I am providing this testimony today to support the passage of Anne Arundel Bill 2016. Community assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions. The development of these facilities must adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of the residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the Chesapeake Bay and its critical areas. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to the insufficient regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. The bill seeks to differentiate between small and large facilities. It can be sited on residentially zoned properties and would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. The bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large campus facilities, which allow developers to skirt rules designed to address large facilities. Campus facilities completely change residential neighborhoods by introducing large commercial operations of high-density housing, such as is occurring at Windmill Point at the end of Mountain Road, Route 177. With all the land use regulations mandated by Anne Arundel County, it is unfathomable to comprehend why there is a lack of regulation and protection for existing homeowners to prevent developers from redeveloping residential property into group homes or community-based assisted living facilities. These developments can fundamentally alter the character of longstanding neighbors and communities who are not able to cope with increased traffic, much less the increased demands such redevelopment places on existing septic systems, thus endangering the environmentally sensitive Chesapeake Bay. I ask you to favorably consider the adoption of Bill 1620. Kathy Miner, 3217 Chrisland Drive, Annapolis, oppose. Hillen Smith, P.O. Box 6488, Baltimore, support. I am longtime resident of Anne Arundel County and am writing to you today to support the passage of Anne Arundel Bill 1620. Community assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions, but they must adhere to the community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of the residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the Bay and its critical areas. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to the lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. The bill seeks to differentiate between small and large facilities that can be sited on residentially zoned properties and would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. The bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large campus facilities, which allow the developers to skirt rules designed to address large facilities. Campus facilities completely change residential neighborhoods by introducing large commercial operations of high-density housing, such as is occurring at Windmill Point at the end of Mountain Road, Route 177. Thank you for your consideration of my point of view. Connice Reynolds, 632 Round Hill Road, Gibson Island, support. I'm a longtime resident of Anne Arundel County and I'm writing to you today to support the passage of Anne Arundel Bill 1620. Community assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions, but they must adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the Bay and its critical area. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to the lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. The bill seeks to differentiate between small and large facilities that can be sited on residentially zoned properties and would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. The bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large campus facilities, which allow developers to skirt rules designed to address large facilities. Campus facilities completely change residential neighborhoods by introducing large commercial operations of high-density housing, such as is occurring at Windmill Point at the end of Mountain Road, Route 177. I support Anne Arundel Bill 1620 and hope that you will pass it. Michael and Carolyn Meredith, 776 Skywater Road, Gibson Island. Anne Arundel support. Anne Arundel County Bill 1620 will limit encroachment of community-based assisted living housing by preventing clusters of adjacent buildings in a single residential area. 2, it will help limit the burden on public utilities and or mitigate threats to critical care areas dependent on wells and or septic systems. 3, it will limit the flow of traffic in congested areas, especially where there is a single road in and out of a residential area. 4, it will require adequate parking for facilities. John Sheldon, P.O. Box 245, Gibson Island. As full-time residents of Anne Arundel County for over 8 years, we are writing to ask you to support the passage of Bill 1620 as sponsored by Nathan Volky. Of particular concern to us is the lack of regulation for community-based assisted living facilities and group homes in residential neighborhoods within this county. Bill 1620 begins to address this concern by differentiating between small and large facilities, specifically the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers of such for-profit facility zoning code that allow them to disregard current rules, allowing the expansion of these facilities within residential neighborhoods, presumably under the Fair Housing Act, without regard for the effect on septic and well systems, critical areas in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, ease of access to emergency medical care, and even the immediate needs of the clientele, all without the input of the affected community, is unconscionable. Please support passage of Anne Arundel County Bill 1620 and support future legislation to correct existing loopholes and irregularities in regulating assisted living facilities to protect residential communities from inappropriate development that downgrades their neighbors. Thank you for your consideration of our concerns. And this is Elizabeth and John Sheldon. Martha and Tom Nolan, 650 Broadwater Way, Gibson Island, support. We are writing in support of Bill 1620. We live at 650 Broadwater Way on Gibson Island. My parents bought the house in 1947, and we have been living here year-round since 2001. As a child, I spent summers here sailing and swimming on the Magathie and the Chesapeake. Our children have also had that wonderful experience, and now our grandchildren are also enjoying the wonders of the Magathie and Chesapeake. We are very concerned about the building of group homes so close to the Magathie and Chesapeake that do not have adequate septic systems and could harm our fragile environment. We feel very strongly about this and are yearly contributors to the Magathie River Foundation and Alliance for the Chesapeake. Thank you for your consideration. Teresa Medicus, 3505 Keswick Road, Baltimore, oppose. I'm a family nurse practitioner, and I work in both Baltimore City and Anne Arundel County. As a lifelong resident of Baltimore, I've watched my city deteriorate exponentially due to the opiate epidemic. It affects both my daily practice at Johns Hopkins and the community I come home to at night. Additionally, I lost my brother to a heroin overdose when I was 15. This is not just a profession for me, it's personal. In 2018, I was given the opportunity to work additionally at Evolve Life Centers in Pasadena. At the time, I was pregnant and needing to supplement my limited income while out on maternity leave. I'm still here over 2 years later because I've witnessed firsthand the amazing change made possible by providing recovery to those in need as well as a safe living environment. Approximately 97% of my patients live in our residential programs in this community. I've witnessed clients come in freshly detoxed, scarred, doubting they could make it 30 days, begin to turn corners, grow, and eventually graduate from our outpatient programs. They've gone on to become upstanding members of the community, many of them going on to help others. Community living is an essential component to this growth as they reintegrate back into a healthy society. I cannot imagine my many patients' success without these residences in place. I believe Anne Arundel County can and should serve as an example and support the residential recovery housing programs staying in place. Gregory Waltgen, 5109 Mountain Road, Pasadena, support. The loophole in the current county zoning code allows high-density commercial individual assisted living businesses, so-called community-based assisted living facility, to be run in any residential neighborhood. Think about that. Stacking neighboring properties allows up to 16 beds per building lot, creating up and above all environmental concerns, septic, roof runoff, impervious surface issues, traffic density, parking, access, and safety issues in what I believe are not compatible with residential use. These businesses can become large-scale campuses in the middle of any neighborhood. Think about that again. This is a zoning nightmare that needs to be addressed and will continue to be until these facilities are restricted to areas that will support the density these businesses need to operate safely. At a minimum, they should not be allowed in areas without public sewer because the septic load is much higher with at least one bathroom per resident. Restricted in the critical area for the same reason, public water due to high water consumption and supply issues from private wells, along with proper access for safety equipment to service such facilities. Any residential area can become a large-scale business anywhere. I thought zoning laws were to protect the property owners and the environment. Anyone that owns residential property is affected by this very short-sighted and I believe financially influenced mistake. This is a zoning issue, not a discrimination issue. Will Pisano, 606 Cooley's Pond Road, Gibson Island, support. I support this bill that clarifies what type of commercial businesses, like an assisted living business, that can be located in the middle of a residential neighborhood. Not opposed to assisted living facilities at all, but they would not be surrounded by primary owner occupied homes. Simply not safe with commercial traffic being mixed with roads where children play. Not proper to put a strain on the water and sewer systems as all intended for single family use. Terry Pisano, 606 Cooley's Pond Road, Gibson Island. Support. I support this bill as there should be requirements to safely have assisted living facilities located in areas of the county that work for all parties. Current system has too many problems as commercial buildings are being used in the middle of 100% owner-occupied residential buildings. Bill Pisano, 608 Cooley's Pond Road, Gibson Island. Support. Want to see better controls on where assisted living facilities can be located. At the present, way too much latitude and not fair to the owner-occupied primary residence neighborhoods where several assisted living organizations have and are trying to locate. Do not allow these commercial functions to sit next to a primary homeowner. Simply not right. Melissa Ann Hopkins Smith, 1746 Danbury Road, Gibson Island. Support. I grew up sailing on the Chesapeake Bay and am writing to you today to support the passage of Arundel Bill 1620. Community assisted living facilities are both necessary and positive institutions, but they must adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of the residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations to protect the bay and its critical areas. Bill 1620 addresses a very important county issue relating to the lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. I am afraid for the health of the Chesapeake Bay. It is a national treasure. Please do your part to protect this resource. This bill seeks to differentiate between small and large facilities that can be sited on residentially zoned properties and would bring Anne Arundel County in line with other Maryland counties. The bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large commercial facilities, which allows developers to skirt rules designed to address large facilities. Campus facilities completely change residential neighborhoods by introducing large commercial operations of high-density housing, such as is occurring at Windmill Point at the end of Mountain Road, Route 177. I have received an excellent PowerPoint presentation on this subject, which I've attached. It outlines the challenges its members are facing on Mountain Road. I think you will find it presents a very compelling argument as to the importance of Bill 1620. Thank you for your consideration of my point of view. Susan Opie Owen, 639 Broadwater Way, Gibson Island. Support. Apologies, this requires timer. I recently studied a PowerPoint presentation concerning Anne Arundel County's Bill 1620. I support this bill as it addresses important county issues relating to the lack of regulation for group homes in residential neighborhoods. As a retired social worker, I am aware that these facilities provide essential support services for those who need help with activities of daily living. I work to secure services for the underserved, and I understand the need for these resources. I've lived on Gibson Island for 20 years. When I bought property, I signed restrictive covenants. Their purpose was and is to protect the character of the neighborhood with adherence to environmental laws and regulations that protect the bay and its critical areas. A developer has purchased a neighborhood residence and begun converting it into an assisted living facility. This plan would wreak havoc with the purpose of those laws. When I converted a parking pad into a small garage, it was a lengthy and expensive process to ensure that my plan complied with critical area considerations. Both Gibson Island Corporation and the county had to agree to the plans. This developer's company did not submit nor seek approvals from Gibson Island Corporation, despite repeated notices about the need to abide by corporation rules before proceeding with development. The same entity has also purchased 3 properties less than 2 miles up Mountain Road and is developing them into assisted living facilities. Most of the Mountain Road corridor is 2 to 3 lanes and heavily traveled. Closer to this end, the road becomes 2 lanes with no shoulder. The address of the facility on Gibson Island is a narrow 1-lane road. Presently, construction workers and later staff, visitors, and vendors will choke the area. Parking will be an issue. Young children play in homes next door, across the lane, and up the street. During hurricanes, this island's causeway has flooded, making it impossible to leave. Another time, when power lines fell across the road by the causeway, it was closed to traffic from early evening and I'll finish the sentence. It was closed to traffic from early evening until the next day. Jay McCutcheon, 5143 Mountain Road, Pasadena, support. I am part of Windmill Point Group. Apologies, this one also needed timer. We are experiencing one of the most serious times of health risk in our lives. Are we surprised with level of illness and death in these environments? The identification of a new normal for our senior citizens and other comprised people who choose to live in an assisted living center, nursing home, and other group of persons should include a wide variety of new guidelines and regulations to protect these folks, their hosts, caregivers, visitors, and others who come into these compact living environments. The approaches to the care and housing for our senior citizens has been exposed to pre-existing shortcomings in the last few months more than any other time before in recent history. The design and operation of long-term care, nursing homes, and assisted living centers have been tested to the extremes. These organizations have been the sites they are at most high-risk centers of disease and death we have ever seen from epidemics. The problems that face folks and operators in the environment are not short-term quick fixes. Close quarters, lack of space for safety and isolation, congregate dining, low salaried staff with high turnover and limited training, and infectious environments everywhere have contributed to some of the highest COVID-19 outbreaks in every state across the country. This is not only true for residents, but for the visitors, the staff, and all outside contractors and the communities in which they are a part. These facilities were never designed or staffed or equipped to serve or support public challenges like the flu or H1N1 or COVID-19. New rules and regulations will have to be developed to serve and protect these residents and staff. We must move from this status as real estate investments to organizations that are designed to serve and protect the residents, patients, staff, and visitors. We must deal with the realities of the health of the intended persons to be served, who often have a wide variety of chronic conditions, compromised status by virtue of their age, mental, and medical conditions. The current unmet requirements for space. I will finish the sentence. The current unmet requirements for space, patients, residents, staff, supplies, isolation, special health and mobility equipment, and food prep and consumption, sanitation, high traffic areas with exposure to virus and other health issues are real challenges. Patricia Gail Campbell, 484 Riverside Drive, Pasadena, support. I have lived in Anne Arundel County much of my life. I strongly support this because it benefits many more of the citizens. There are ways to have assisted living without disrupting established neighborhoods and profiting developers. I have seen up close how the current situation can upset the community because it is happening to friends of mine. It was shocking to me to see what is currently allowed. Colleen C. Reed, 1716 Skippers Row, Gibson Island. Support. Yes. I am writing in support of Anne Arundel County Council Bill 1620. Please consider this to be offered testimony in support of that legislation. As a 25-year resident of Anne Arundel County, I would like our residential communities to remain residential without commercial businesses in their neighborhoods. Multi-assisted living houses in the county and elsewhere in Maryland are really commercial for-profit businesses, even though the promoters and owners like to pretend otherwise and say they are only advocates for aged or disabled. They convert adjacent residential properties to commercial properties step by step and evade the county zoning laws in doing so. That deception is simply not right. There are many examples, and I would be happy to provide names and addresses as soon as the council wants them. I have deep concerns about the impact of multi-building commercial businesses on existing residential streets and intersections with more traffic. Of equal concern to me as well are assisted living homes with overloaded and non-compliant septic systems holding more sewage for bathrooms and commercial kitchens that can be properly discharged, especially near the Magothy River in Chesapeake Bay where I live. I fear county budgetary constraints and overpowering lobbying are preventing common sense enforcement by the various county departments. Careful oversight and monitoring by the county is desperately required to monitor compliance by multi-unit assisted living homes with environmental laws and zoning regulations. Let me emphasize that I support the notion of homes for the disabled and aged. However, as a nearby neighbor to the Windmill Point neighborhood, I would like Bill 1620 to pass so that plans for a particular commercial compound with 3 and perhaps 4 houses on Mountain Road and very close to the Magothy River will be promptly reevaluated. Rachel Walton, 2001 Bay Road, Pasadena, support. I support this bill as I am concerned by the lack of rules for assisted living in residential neighborhoods. Currently, there is one being developed for 13 beds on well and septic in critical area and is in the process of expanding to 2 abutted properties for 40 plus beds, creating a campus-like facility. Builders join properties as they purchase under different names to bypass laws. The facility is at the end of a dead-end road, which is frequently closed from accidents, which should be a safety concern, along with the inadequate ingress and egress. Other Maryland counties have restrictions on these developments. Why not Anne Arundel County? Brian Rogers, 623 Cotterill Road, Gibson Island. Support. Community assisted living facilities are necessary, but should adhere to community guidelines that have been put in place to protect the character of residential neighborhoods, including adherence to environmental laws and regulations designed to protect our bay and its critical areas. This bill addresses the acquisition of adjoining properties by developers for the purpose of building large campus facilities, which allow developers to skirt the rules designed to regulate large facilities. Passing this bill is the right thing to do and will help protect the character of our neighborhoods. Paul Christensen, 231 Hidden Valley Road, Tracy's Landing. Support. Assisted living facilities for up to 16 residents are currently permitted in any residentially zoned area as a result of 2015 legislation. Developers have found a loophole in the code that allows several adjacent facilities to be chained together to allow much higher capacity. This loophole needs to be closed by passing Bill 1620. A related issue is whether group living facilities of any type should be allowed in critical area, which is more likely to be unsuitable for associated well water needs and septic volumes. Please support Bill 1620. Rick Waltgen, 2001 Bay Road, Pasadena. Support. I support this bill. There needs to be some regulations imposed on residential assisted living facilities. Builders are bypassing vague laws and creating large campuses in residential neighborhoods. Well and septic critical areas should be a concern as we try to keep our waters clean. Location and safety need to be a factor as one is being built at the end of a dead-end road, which is periodically closed for hours from accidents, electrical poles, water main breaks, etc. John Day, P.O. Box 213, Gibson Island, support. Inserting a business into a neighborhood changes the character of the neighborhood. Permitting a business to expand within a neighborhood can destroy a neighborhood. The rights of residents should not be overwhelmed by the greed of a developer. Okay, I will need the timer for this one, which was sent to the council by lobbyist Mr. Bariano on behalf of Lawrence Adler. Lawrence Adler, 1487 Tembury Common Road, Annapolis. I'm the owner of 9 properties that have been operated as group homes in Crownsville, Maryland, on Martins Grant Court and St. Stephen's Wood Drive. In 2010, I founded a company named Serenity Acres Treatment and Recovery Centers. It was formed to provide services in a group home setting to persons suffering from addiction. At Serenity, we treated thousands of patients with serious health issues, including opioid and alcohol addiction. Generally, a patient would stay inpatient at Serenity for 30 days and receive care from healthcare professionals for drug and/or alcohol rehabilitation. We treated up to 16 patients in each group home. I operated Serenity until 2016 when I sold the company to Meridian Behavioral Health, a nonprofit healthcare provider, but I maintained ownership of the real property where the services were provided. In 2019, Meridian ceased operations in Maryland. I am now in the process of leasing the properties to group home treatment centers to continue providing these valuable services to Anne Arundel County residents. During this process, I have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars upgrading the homes, including the installation of fire suppression systems to comply with county code, the directives of the fire marshal, and the health department. I received a letter from the Anne Arundel County Department of Planning and Zoning dated April 13, 2020, which states that for the properties I own, they are classified as group homes, a permitted use under the county code. In addition, the letter states there are no variances, special exceptions, or enforcement actions pending on the property, that we have no reason to believe at this time that either the use of the property or the improvements are non-conforming. Bill 1620 seeks to change that, though changing long-time use and rights relative to the properties that have been working well for nearly a decade. Serenity has been operated legally for nearly a decade, and Bill 1620 takes away the rights without permission. It is my understanding, I will finish the sentence. It is my understanding that this bill will create 2 categories of community-based assisted living facilities, group home, and recovery residences. That concludes the first 50 of the submitted public testimony. As mentioned, the rest of the testimony was reviewed by all the council and will be posted online.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The public hearing on bill number 1620 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 1620.
Madam Chair, that concludes the submitted public testimony, the first 50, so we can close public testimony.
Oh, I believe I just did that, but we did need to make a correction to the record.
Madam Chair, we seem to have a problem with your audio. Are you plugged in?
According to my screen, I'm not on mute.
Unfortunately, you are not showing up as muted, but we cannot hear you.
This is Jessica Hare, District 7. I can hear the chair just fine.
Okay.
I can hear her too.
Am I just the only one not hearing her?
Well, everyone nod if you can hear me. This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. Okay, I'm going to proceed. One thing.
Madam Chair, if you give me one moment to figure out why I can't hear you.
Sure.
Okay, Madam Chair, it appears I became unplugged, and I'm a little worried that I became unplugged when I was reading testimony.
We could hear you the whole time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank
Again,
you, and my apologies.
No problem. These are fun times. Again, this is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. We did need to go back in the beginning of the public testimony, and there was an error in that this council did receive 83 submissions of written testimony for bill number 1620. However, in the script, we flipped the numbers, and there were 30 opposed to the legislation and 53 were in support. I know that was a point that we needed to clarify. It was written, it was just transposed in the script. So
I was going to say, I apologize if I read it incorrectly. We don't want to misrepresent.
No, the language given to you in the script was just inaccurate. But with that, the public hearing on bill number 1620 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of bill number 1620.
Bill number 1620, an ordinance concerning zoning, residential districts, community-based assisted living facilities 1 and 2, group homes 1 and 2, recovery residences 1 and 2, and rooming houses.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I see Mr. Volky is prepared to ask a question or.
Not so much a question, Madam Chair, but thank you. Nathan Volky, District 3. I wanted to thank everyone who sent in their testimony for or against this bill. I knew when I sort of undertook this path of trying to write a piece of legislation that would balance all of the competing interests that are involved here, that it was not going to be easy, and that there were big forces, particularly in the lobbying and development world, who were not going to like this bill. And so I recognized that, but however, I realized this was where the community was going, and there were concerns that the community had that I thought were legitimate and that we should address, and that were loopholes in the code. And I believe this bill does address that. I also just want to add in, personally for me, my grandmother actually lived her final years in a community-based assisted living facility. She died in a community-based assisted living facility in Pasadena, and she received wonderful care. She was very, very well taken care of. It was a tremendous sort of relief for my mother and some of her siblings in having to take care of her. And ultimately, we had nothing but good things to say about that. So for anyone who's concerned that this bill is in an effort to try to shut down particular businesses or entities, I just want to be clear. I've had family and friends who have been involved in the recovery community and have needed to go to recovery facilities. Again, assisted living facilities are something that I have experience with. So I just want to be clear kind of where this is coming from, and it's not from any sort of ill-intentioned place. I did want to clarify something that I heard repeatedly in the testimony, which was that this would somehow create a propagation, if you will, of uncertified recovery residences. I just want to be clear about something. Our code currently does not even define what is a recovery residence. We don't even have a definition in section 18-1-101 of our code. There is no definition. You can go look, you won't find it. So in fact, as everyone knows, I'm big on definitions, and this bill does create a definition for both recovery residences 1 and 2, and it requires that both of them be certified under 19-2502 of the Health General Article of the state. So again, there's no concern about certification because this bill brings something that is not existing in the current sort of unregulated environment, if you will, in the county, because there is no requirement in the county for those certifications to be in place. So this bill corrects that. And I appreciate, again, everybody's testimony, but I thought that was an important point that needed to be corrected in there in terms of what people's concerns were, because this actually does the opposite of what they were thinking that it would do. So with that, at the appropriate time, I'll be offering an amendment to correct a drafting error, but that's all I have for the moment.
Thank you. Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. This question is from the Office of Law. It's been a while since we did our initial work session on this bill. Can you remind me which jurisdiction has legislation on the books regarding group homes, assisted living, and recovery houses? I think it may have been Montgomery, but I'm not 100% sure.
Sir, you're muted.
Greg Swain, County Attorney. That's correct. It is Montgomery County, and by that I mean they have sort of the delineation between the 1 to 8 resident facilities and then the 9 to 16 facilities and above. So it's not exactly what this bill does, but they do make that sort of a split, and they do regulate the large facilities, which we currently do not.
Thank you.
Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. In light of that differentiation between number of people, how do I say this? The recovery homes are certified in a different way in regard to occupancy. Is there anyone here from the administration and on the panel that can speak to how the business model and support model for recovery homes differs from assisted living?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Barron for the administration. I will ask Miss Adrienne Michler to join us, and maybe she can help shed some light on that question. And we have a couple other people in the wings if she is not able to answer that. So I believe I've stalled long enough, and I believe she's in the room.
Thank you, Ms. Michler. You have the floor.
Yes. Good evening.
Did you want to try that again?
Good evening, Madam Chair and honorable council members. Actually, those are definitions that are more with the substance use disorder treatment providers, and they are not something that I really could answer. I would be happy to get back to the council with a proper definition if you'd like.
Well, with that, group homes are utilized in mental health. Does it translate into the mental health recovery facilities or supportive housing for mental health?
In our mental health group homes, we, again, I'm not, they're very specific definitions, and recovery residences are typically, those definitions are typically intended for residences that are, hold themselves out to be substance-free living arrangements. It's not a clinical model. Our residences that for mental health services, actually there are mental health services that are available at those. So that would be something that would distinguish them.
So well, I'll leave it at that.
I guess the one other thing that I could mention is the mental health housing are licensed and they are accredited facilities, where recovery residences are not. They have a certain, well, they're certified, and there are certain criteria that have to be met to be certified, but the mental health housing is actually licensed and accredited.
So are mental health group homes affected by this legislation?
It would depend on the size of it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions for the sponsor or the folks in the virtual table? I understand you have an amendment. Madam Secretary, oh, Mr. Volky.
Oh, sorry, I was just confirming. Yes, I do have an amendment.
Okay. Madam Secretary, please read amendment number 1.
Madam Chair, I will give it one moment to see if it will, there, it's coming up on screen. Amendment number 1. This amendment strikes proposed language allowing assisted living facilities as special exception uses in RA residential districts.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved, Madam Chair. Nathan Volky, District 3.
Is there a second?
Second, Jessica Hare, District 7.
Is there any discussion on this amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just briefly explain it so people understand. Basically, when this bill was drafted, there was never an intent to do any kind of change to the larger assisted living facilities, excuse me. Unfortunately, during the drafting, this was inadvertently added, and so it makes assisted living facilities that are the large scale, sort of the professional model, greater than 16 beds, so really like 17 and up model. And I shouldn't use the term professional because the smaller assisted livings are professional too, but I mean to say more corporate model is what I intended to say. Those facilities basically would now be allowed in rural agricultural areas, which is not the intent of this bill. So this is to correct a drafting error. It is not a technical amendment because it actually substantively changes the bill, but this should never have been included in the bill that was introduced. And when it was pointed out by the auditor in her blue letter, we immediately drafted this amendment to fix this. So this is, I think of it sort of as a technical amendment because it was a scrivener's error, but it's technically substantive. So I would ask my colleagues to support it to remove this because it was not the intent in the bill.
Thank you. Looking at the chart, can I just ask a question? Is there also an omission of allowing assisted living facilities in RA? It's all the others are allowed in RA except assisted living facilities too. Is there a reason for that?
No, and in fact, I think that's where it was originally intended to go. That's maybe another amendment that we need to fix because we had a discussion during the drafting of this bill that we would allow the assisted living facilities 1 and 2 in all residential districts across the board for consistency's sake. And so I think that may be what happened because in talking with some of the folks involved with the drafting of this, there had been that discussion. So I think you're actually correct, Madam Chair. Maybe we need another amendment to correct that.
Is there any further discussion on amendment? I'm getting all lost. Amendment number 1. Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Mr. Pruskey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Nay.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I could not hear you.
Nay.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Because the sponsor requested that we approve this to effectuate his intent, and I want to extend him the same courtesy he has extended me. Aye.
Mr. Volky?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Rodvian.
I would like to change my vote as well. I would like to change my vote to aye. I appreciate your reasoning, Councilwoman Lacy, and I would like to follow suit.
So noted. Okay. 6 in the affirmative, 1 in the negative. Amendment number 1 is adopted.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. Bill number 1620, as amended, will be heard on June 1st, 2020. We will move along in our agenda today. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution 1620.
Resolution number 1620, resolution urging the county executive to reopen Anne Arundel County.
This is a resolution brought to us by Mr. Volky, Ms. Fiedler, and Ms. Hare. Who is leading on this tonight?
Madam Chair, Jessica Hare, I can start, or it doesn't.
Ms. Hare, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do believe each one of us will have comments at some point this evening. I'd actually like to start. I don't want to speak for anyone else on the council, but I imagine everyone's goal on this council and in the administration, in fact, is to both preserve the public health of our constituents in the county and also to eventually return to what I'll call typical operations. Certainly, there are different thoughts on the best path to get there, but I believe we're all trying to fairly represent all of the people in our districts in the county. I'd like to say thank you in advance to all of my colleagues and the administration for each person's dedication to everything we have experienced so far in COVID-19 and all of the efforts you all have put in and all of the hours you have put in. This resolution calls for us to follow the governor's order in moving on to a phase 1 reopening with appropriate safety protocols and restrictions. I want to clarify that it does not at all suggest that we should wildly open the county in a free-for-all sort of manner. It takes small steps towards a safe reopening. This is not a straightforward analysis. Nothing we can do with COVID-19 so far is a straightforward analysis. And elected officials are tasked with balancing the concerns from various aspects of the community. No decision can be made in a vacuum. Public health, economics, mental health, these are all inextricably intertwined. And the decisions on those metrics are ideally made in an open, collaborative process between the branches of government. With that in mind, I'd like to take a minute to share some stories, particularly with respect to small business, and some data that has struck me in the last week as background on my vote. I anticipate that my colleagues will address some of the mental health and faith related items. So over the last 2 months, we have proven together that as a community, we can patronize grocery stores, Target, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, and garden centers while maintaining safety protocols sufficiently such that the level of hospitalizations in the state from COVID-19 has plateaued. In fact, data shows that our current COVID-19 hospitalizations in the state are the lowest they've been in the last 3 weeks. At the same time, I have received hundreds of phone calls and emails from residents who cannot maintain their bills or feed their families because they are not receiving PPP money, have not received unemployment, and indeed cannot even get through the phone line at the state to figure out the status of their unemployment application, despite repeated attempts at all hours of the day. Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation has given us some data this week based on a budget request that I had last week that shows that out of 116 survey responses that they sent out to small businesses countywide, only 23 received PPP funds. When we drill down to the minority and women-owned small businesses in the county, only 1 out of 49 survey responses received the Maryland COVID-19 emergency loan. Just 1. Only 2 received the emergency grant. One small business owner wrote to me, "I get up in the middle of the night to try to finalize the nightmare of applying for unemployment. I finally just got through, and it appears I will receive $176 per week. I have no idea how that figure was determined. Disheartened doesn't even begin to describe how I feel right now. On top of just plain mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion, I have paid into the system as an employer since 1993, never had a claim filed, and I'm staring at the screen at $176. Another constituent wrote me, I haven't worked since March 23rd. I've been calling an average of 4 to 6 hours a day on every unemployment number on the website and only get busy signals. One small business owner reported using home equity to pay their staff. Several constituents have pointed out the fairly blatant inequity of allowing a big box store like Home Depot to open while our neighbors are crushed with what was supposed to be temporary measures. Simultaneously, in late April, the United Nations warned of a hunger pandemic by the end of the year due to the financial implications of COVID-19 that will place 130 million people at risk of starvation. Longer shutdowns can only exacerbate that risk. In other words, what I see is a breaking point for businesses and employees in the county. The hopelessness and desperation in the calls and emails I'm receiving cause me significant concerns. And that leads me a little bit to the mental health and faith issues that I think my colleagues will address later on. We must keep these issues in mind as we consider public health in this county. They are not separable. So when we talk about the public health, obviously we talk about the stay-at-home order. The stay-at-home order, when it was initially placed, was not intended to eradicate the virus. The goal of the stay-at-home order, at least as I understood it, was to flatten the curve, give hospitals preparation time, so that anyone who does become sick can receive appropriate care without overwhelming the system. We will have to live with this virus for some time. I was fortunate enough to have a conversation with the health officer yesterday, and Dr. K, if you're listening, I'd like to say thank you for your time on the phone. I know you're extremely busy right now. I really appreciate the time you took to have a one-on-one conversation with me. Based on that call, I understand that the hospitals have the needed surge capacity. They have sufficient PPE for several weeks, 2 weeks, I believe it was, at least 2 weeks. And more tests are on their way in a shipment due to be delivered, I believe, next week. So with that in mind, let's be clear, we're in a different place now than where we were 2 months ago. The social, emotional, and financial well-being of our population must be considered in the decision-making process for any reopening or continued restrictions, along with the overall public health of the community. And at this juncture, with hospitalizations declined, sufficient hospital capacity, sufficient PPE, businesses facing dire need, and the food insecurity that we're seeing, we must allow small businesses, photography, studios, florists, salons, small retail stores, etc., these mom and pop shops that make up the backbone of our community. They must be allowed to operate in the same vein that a Target or a Walmart or a liquor store can, with appropriate safety protocols. Capacity restrictions, mask requirements, social distancing can allow these companies to begin to reopen without sacrificing safety. I spoke specifically with Dr. K about this yesterday. I would be interested to hear any further comments he has on that. It was my understanding that there may be some avenue that's viable along those lines from my conversation with him, but I would like to hear more of his thoughts. Like I said, this resolution doesn't create any wild opening. It asks us to follow the governor's orders. I would like to ask my colleagues' support in this resolution and urge your vote yes. Thank you.
Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. We did not read the entire resolution. Did anyone of the sponsors care to do that at this time for the benefit of the public? Mr. Volky?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe the title of the resolution was Resolution to Reopen Anne Arundel County. So it was pretty straightforward, but I just thought it might be helpful for the folks at home to know what we were debating, particularly because we had just talked about Bill 1620 and now we're on Resolution 1620. So the transition may not have been clear for everybody. But at this point, I think Councilwoman Fiedler may go next. So,
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you. I want to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilwoman Hare, but touch on a few other things. There are many facets to COVID-19 and the situation that we're in, and I completely understand that people have concerns. I also have concerns over the long-term consequences of not moving forward to phase 1 under the governor's orders. Half of 1% of the population in our county has tested positive for COVID-19. According to all of the experts, including our health officer, the vast majority recover. Our governor has said that we have adequate bed capacity in ICUs and acute beds. At our 2 county hospitals, if you look at the data that is posted online, the acute beds and ICU bed admissions have remained flat or declined for 30 days. We have been preparing to slowly go back to normal, and we've prepared for the inevitable increase in cases that come with that. When we talk about COVID-19 and health, I think that it's important not to forget about mental health. Councilwoman Hare touched on that briefly. We know already that the county warm lines have increased by 24 to 55% in calls. I too can hear the stress in my constituents' calls, in their emails, that they need to go back to work. They need to open their places of business to feed their families. We also know that studies of the Great Recession, that there were long-lasting mental health impacts from prolonged stress. A recent article on the American Psychological Association website notes that a recent study of COVID-19 effects, and looking back at what we learned from the Great Recession, that people are losing their jobs. They are experiencing financial strain, housing insecurity in the current climate. The research suggests that all of these experiences increase risk for long-lasting declines in mental health, which can compound and prolong the economic costs of a recession through lost productivity and healthcare utilization. The study then goes on to say that health inequities may deepen, especially for the underserved adult males who show increased rates of suicide during financial downturns. We have all discussed concerns over mental health on this council, and we know the extreme outcomes when someone is faced with isolation and stress. This council voted unanimously to declare suicide a mental health crisis. So I am thinking about the health of our county when we discuss how we are going to move forward. Someone suggested in an email to me that the business community that is reaching out is funded by federal level politicians with big pockets. I can tell you that the only businesses that I have heard from are the mom and pop shops that have children in our school system. They're members of the community. They have saved their entire lives and invested and have put their houses on the line to keep their business open. They have already begun to prepare to open their doors in an effort to save their businesses, and they want to do so safely so that their customers are safe and stay healthy, and so that their family stays safe and healthy. One salon owner reached out to me and listed everything that she has done in preparation to open her salon safely. She has several stylists, but she has installed plexiglass between shampoo bowls to prevent 2 clients from being too close. She's removed all cloth furniture, closed the waiting room, moved all chairs in the salon to be spaced at least 6 feet from others. She has a sanitation station with a sign when you walk in. The door reads appointments only. She sent out new guidelines, including clients waiting in cars until they can be serviced. She's taking employee and client temperatures upon arrival, no contact payment methods when possible, special order sanitizing wipes that kill the virus within a minute's time, and has removed all magazine and drink stations in her facility. Another home store owner reached out and said that she had prepared to offer shopping appointments online. She still hasn't received unemployment payments, but she looks across the parking lot at a craft store that it's allowed to have patrons into their location. For weeks, businesses and faith leaders have followed the governor's orders and waited to meet the metrics to start phase 1. And there was never any indication from leadership in the county that these metrics weren't adequate. When we last sat as the Board of Health, the news was that the numbers were flattening and that we and our leaders our leaders, I'm sorry, in contact tracing. And I think that's impressive. And I applaud Dr. Kalyana for those efforts. But the goalpost continues to move. I truly believe that we have reached that tipping point, and I wouldn't be sitting here today asking my colleagues to support a move to the governor's phase 1 opening if I didn't fully believe that it is the right decision. And that is all I have to say at this time.
Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to second something that Councilwoman Fiedler alluded to. Walmart didn't call me. Lowe's didn't call me. Home Depot didn't call me to ask to stay open. I'm getting calls from the mom and pop shops that are on Main Street. Those big folks, they call Congress. You know what Congress and everybody else all the way down has done? Kept them open. Who's been closed? Our local businesses. They're the ones that are hurting. So I just want to, follow up on the metrics for a second, because Councilwoman Fiedler made a great point about how the goalpost keeps moving. Yeah, it does. When we sat as the Board of Health, we heard that there were 4+1 metric that we were going to look at. They were ICU capacity, test capacity, contact tracing and case management, PPE, and equity. Those were the 5. Now, I've looked at the dashboard, the phased reopening dashboard that is updated as of today to say where Anne Arundel County is. We've now moved from 5 metrics to 12 because the 5 have a bunch of subparts now that we have to meet all these different criteria. So it says we've met the sustained 14-day decrease in hospital acute care census. That's met. We have yet to meet the sustained 14-day decrease in ICU census. So even though the overall hospitalizations are going down, the ICU hospitalizations haven't gone down for 14 straight days. So that's one of the reasons, I guess, that we're holding up opening the county. On top of that, in the community, it says sustained decrease in new cases per day and sustained decrease in new deaths per day, undetermined. I don't understand how that can be undetermined when we're tracking this. And frankly, undetermined is not an acceptable answer to our citizens who are sitting there and are hurting and are losing money every day that we don't know the answer to this. That's frankly part of the problem with what's going on, is that there's too much undetermined. Testing, it says less than 10% positive for COVID-19, not met. How many people are being tested? How many are negative? How many are positive? We have trouble even knowing what those numbers are. You read any news article, it's a moving target to figure that out. Testing 2% of the county population per week. Again, we're not there yet. But how many have we tested? Frankly, these are the kind of things that we need to have more data on and more information about. The 14-day supply of PPE, undetermined. How do we not know how much PPE we have? I'm baffled by that. And in terms of contact tracing, as we've said, we've met both of those criteria. They're check, check. And then in terms of health equity, the 5th characteristic that was not in the governor's plan, but that's been added by the county, again, all 3 of those sub-metrics are undetermined. I don't know how we're making policy when we can't determine whether these metrics have been met or not. People deserve better than that. They deserve it. Yes, we met it, or no, we didn't. Give us a reason. Explain it to us. Treat us like adults. And so at this point, the problem that we're having in this county is it is a moving target. And we're not clear on exactly where the target is going to get us and what it is that we need to do to get reopened. And I think the governor laid out a good plan for this. And I think, frankly, there's a lot of people that would like to see him do more. But that's where he went. And I think we need to follow suit and get there so that some of our businesses can start getting back to business. We've had over 50,000 people in this county file for unemployment. We're looking at a 63 million plus shortfall in terms of the tax revenue we're going to have for next year. Wait for the new taxes, folks, because there's either going to be big cuts or there's going to have to be new taxes, one or the other, because you can't pay for something with no money. And ultimately, we're looking at hospitals that are doing layoffs. Anne Arundel Medical Center laid off about, I think it was 1,000 people. Their doctors have taken pay cuts. And yet we're worried about hospital capacity. That's just the business piece of it. And then the public health piece of it. But I'm also bothered immensely by the religious piece of this and the inability of people to practice their faith, which is a fundamental First Amendment freedom that we have in this country. I was on a call with some pastors this weekend, and I got to hear from them firsthand just all the things that they were doing to try to make sure that their congregants were safe. And I've heard that there were some churches who weren't ready for church to open this weekend. Okay, No one said that they had to open this weekend, but for the churches that were ready, why are they being prohibited? Frankly, North Carolina, which is in the Fourth Circuit, Maryland is in the Fourth Circuit too. So, federal law for anybody there, we're going to probably do the same thing, as you can see, because that's how federal law works. North Carolina has struck down almost the exact same ban that we have in the county to say that you're not allowed to meet indoors. So these pastors that I was talking to, they were not advocating for people shoulder to shoulder, packed into pews in a church, everybody singing at the top of their voices, things, virus moving everywhere. They were talking about people being spaced 4 pews apart. They were talking about people being outside in services, 6 feet apart, wearing masks. When we talk about virus dispersion and the way that this virus moves, outside is much less risky than inside. That's why we've allowed people to continue to go outside. So I'm just baffled why more than 10 people aren't allowed to get together for a church service if they're wearing masks and they're spread out apart. So I think all these are the kind of questions, this consistency and this lack of across the board sense in what we're doing that people feel like is involved in what the governor has done, but is missing in what the county executive has done. And so at this point, I'm frankly not advocating that we do something in a reckless way. If you read our resolution, it says do it in a safe way. Make sure the reopening is safe and consistent with the guidelines and the standards that have been put forth. Nobody wants people to get sick. We're not advocating that people should be hurt. But what we are asking for is that the impacts of this virus are far bigger than just the public health piece. And I think we need to be looking at that, we as the council. So again, I'm asking my colleagues to join with us and to call on the county executive to reconsider his decision to keep the county in a more restrictive posture than what the governor has said the state should do. The governor has the data. They're looking at a lot of the same things that the county's looking at. And the governor felt it was an appropriate time to step back from where we were and start getting things open ever so slightly to allow some businesses and some churches to get back to meeting. So I would hope that all of you have heard from constituents. I know I have. I just, while we've been sitting here in this meeting, I have gotten, I think, close to 100 additional pieces of testimony from people asking to be heard on this. And for everybody who submitted your testimony, I just want you to know your testimony doesn't get read in tonight because since we're voting on this the same day, we're suspending the rules and we're just going forward to try to vote on this quickly to put something in front of the county executive to say, here's how the council feels. So your testimony was there. It came to every one of our email inboxes. We've all, I believe, seen it. I know I've been looking at it all day long, watching it roll in. So your voices have been heard. And I want you to know that. I want you to know that your testimony, even though it wasn't read into the record, it got to the county council. We have seen it. So with that, again, I'm just asking my colleagues, let's get together on this. Let's look at what our citizens are asking for, and let's see if there is a way that we can reasonably and responsibly and safely get Anne Arundel County back in business.
Thank you. This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. The administration, Mr. Barron, is here prepared with folks to respond.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And first, joining me, excuse me, is Dr. Nilesh Kalingaraman, our health officer. I want to echo a lot of the sentiments that I just heard. I appreciate what Councilwoman Hare did say. I think everybody here on both sides are operating in good faith. We are all deeply concerned about what damage this pandemic has wrought upon not just people's health, but people's livelihoods. We appreciate the sentiment of this resolution. And I'll be perfectly clear, the administration wants as much as the makers of the resolution to open up. But to echo what Mr. Volky said, we need to do it in a safe and responsible way, and we need to rely on the best science and data that we have available. Lives are literally at stake. On Wednesday at 5 p.m. last week, Governor Hogan announced that he was transferring the responsibility to reopen under stage 1 of the road to recovery to local leaders effective 48 hours from that time. County Executive Pittman our health officer, Dr. Colleen Naraman, other key staff members consulted immediately to determine the county's direction after this unexpected announcement. The administration quickly determined that we could not wait until the Friday deadline to announce, as that would only cause more confusion in the general public. Therefore, in 24 hours after consulting with our health professionals, other neighboring jurisdictions, community, faith leaders, and others, we decided to take some measured steps forward towards reopening. So let's be clear about what the administration decided as what we could do immediately. We lifted the stay-at-home order and defaulted to Governor Hogan's safer at home public advisory. We opened up manufacturing facilities. We opened up churches and houses of worship for individual ministry with a maximum of 10 people. We enabled curbside pickup for businesses that had previously been closed because they were deemed non-essential by Governor Hogan's orders. We enabled barbershops and beauty salons to operate with one customer in the premises at a time, which is what the governor had previously allowed, but we had eliminated the requirement for customers to be essential personnel with a note from their employer requiring a grooming standard. We took these actions because we believe they can be done with minimal risk to our residents if people continue practicing social distance. So as you can see, and I don't know if you can see it, I'm sorry, I don't have it in here, but this is the graphic produced by Governor Hogan. Anne Arundel County is in the middle of the road amongst our sister counties, with 4 jurisdictions choosing to enact a local stay-at-home order. Those are the red counties. That's Montgomery, Prince George's, Charles, and Baltimore City. It's important to note we share a border with 2 of those jurisdictions. We did not make that choice. We are one of the yellow counties that did something similar, and what the county did matches pretty closely with what the counties in yellow did. As I said, we are as anxious as anyone to move forward in a safe and responsible manner, and we want to move as quick as we can, which is why the county executive announced the formation of the COVID recovery work group. The group's first charge is to review the actions that the county took that became official on Friday and make recommendations for a path forward. We asked for people with divergent opinions, not just health professionals, but business leaders and members of this council to join and help advise the county executive as we make these decisions. And I also want to point out, in addition to the measures that we have discussed in the past to assist those that are hurting with food distribution, eviction prevention programs, I also want to highlight one thing we're doing to help our businesses get ready to open, and that's the $5 million Small Business Customer and Employee Protection Grant Program, the CEP, which will provide both money and technical assistance to help businesses make the changes they need to operate without increasing the spread of the virus. And to Mr. Volky's point on religious and faith organizations, I do want to point out that we did receive letters from a diverse cross-section of people of faith, but I'll point out that the Archdiocese of Baltimore has a similar restriction in place that the county executive maintain, which is a limit of 10 in the building, and they don't plan to move to phase 2, which would open it up a little bit further until the end of this month. This uncertainty is troubling for everyone. The county executive, the administration will continue to assess where we are with regard to the governor's orders, make our decisions that put the health of our county residents first. And that includes our business and faith communities. We take these responsibilities seriously and are committed to keeping the county council, both the legislative branch of government and the Board of Health. With that, I want to turn it over to Dr. Kay to make a couple of additional remarks on where we are and some of the points that have been raised. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Good evening, Dr. Kalyana. You have the floor, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the County Council. I'm Nilesh Kalyana, the Health Officer for the Anne Arundel County Department of Health. Thank you for having me here this evening. It's a little over 2 months now since we had our first few cases of COVID-19. I was before you just a few days ago last week at the Board of Health, and I think it's rather telling. We were talking about what our measures for progress were, and I believe Councilwoman Volky, we were talking about the fact that a week prior, state would have been controlling it, and a week after, we would have measures, and here we are today. As Mr. Barron noted last week, the governor switched from implementing uniform changes across the state to giving counties discretion to determine their path to recovery, within set parameters, of course, based on how each county is doing. We continue to balance the need to contain the spread and damage from the virus with the economic, mental health, and social costs. It's a particular reason why we added health equity as part of our framework, is to address those very issues. Mr. Barron addressed how we compare to other counties. And what we're really doing is we're looking at how do we assess our recovery? And we relied on the governor's roadmap to recovery. We drew upon expert guidance from reports published by Johns Hopkins, Harvard, and Duke AEI, the last one of which was a pillar of the governor's roadmap itself. And we consulted with other health officers from the counties in Central Maryland. And there's broad consensus among those counties in terms of the measures. We have as our core the measures in the governor's roadmap. And I want to suggest that the 12 measures that Councilman Volky noted are details, but there's really 6 broad areas. As noted in the governor's roadmap, it's testing capacity, contact tracing capacity, hospital capacity, PPE, of course, the outcomes, the number of cases and the number of deaths. And then the one that we added as a county was health equity. And that's really in recognition of what we were talking about. And I'm happy to go over those measures with you. I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me 1 second. And I'm just going to go through how we constructed this, and I do want to note one thing, that these measures are, as I mentioned, based on those pillars, and we're continuing to refine them. Our goal is that they're a working tool to allow us to make decisions. This tool doesn't make decisions for us. They're used as input for decision makers. And what we see is that our assessment is that our measures are mixed. There's signs we're heading in the right direction based on decreasing acute care bed usage, and that's this measure. But we're not seeing the same thing in terms of our ICU census. We're seeing it flat or even going up a little bit. We noted the phrasing undetermined. The best way to say that is not met, to be quite honest. For these 2 measures, they're very flat. They're not going up anymore, but they're not coming down either in terms of our new cases per day or new deaths per day. And for us, that's a concerning measure. We want to see that go down, because when that goes down, that suggests that we're on the right direction. That plateau suggests that we could tip in either direction. And that's just, from a public health standpoint, puts us at risk for seeing an increase in cases that we would need to take additional measures to control. In terms of testing, we have some testing data on our dashboard, and I'm going to show you some additional data after we go through this. In terms of testing, we look at test positivity rate. It's an important measure. It's been used for respiratory illness pandemics for decades now. Having a test positivity rate at less than 10% means that you're catching the vast majority of people who have illness and then doing that contact tracing, isolation and quarantine and case management, so that you're essentially pulling those people out of the system for a short period of time while you let others go on with their life. As I mentioned, the goal is less than 10%, ideally down to 3%. Currently, so our average is about 18%, and we're drifting downwards. Currently, we're at about 15%, but it's a pretty noisy data set. And then testing 2% of the county population per week. Once again, that was drawn from expert guidance. Particularly, this was from a Harvard study. And that's actually on the lower side of recommendations. That we've been growing in that, and right now we're about 0.9% of the county population. In terms of PPE, undetermined is really because we're looking across a variety of sectors. We want to make sure that throughout our healthcare system, we have enough. We know our hospitals do. We know our nursing homes are in better place. Many of them have that 14-day supply, not all of them. The health department does, and we're working with our primary care, recovery houses, behavioral health to understand their supply and how many days of supply they have on hand. One of the things that we've learned is that what used to be an adequate supply of PPE, what used to be 14 days, is now not because of much higher usage of PPE. And so we're seeing a lot of recalculation, and the term of art is burn rate. And that's why it's challenging to pin this number down, because how much you need is changing for some of these organizations. We talked about contact tracing. I'll note that we have that capacity, and we built that capacity out specifically to be ready for this. So we're ready to go on that. We're able to handle, as we get more cases, what we do with that. And then in the health equity measures, we're really just finalizing how we can convey clear metrics. I understand the concern about undetermined. I would ask for your patience for a few more days while we put concrete measures that go beyond a description and more to numeric goals for how we achieve health equity. It's not meant as a dodge or a stall. It's simply us building out what is an important part and something that we talk about amongst county health departments of how we add that on to what the governor's roadmap is. And so let me show you a little bit of the data. This is all available on our website as of today. And so if you want to follow along, certainly do that. Here we're looking at our data dashboard for our hospitals, and we're looking at those trend lines. This blue line is what the acute care, or what you would consider a regular hospital bed. And yes, we see that going down, and that's a really good sign. We're very happy to see that. But the ICU census we're seeing is fairly flat and is going up now, and has been doing so for over a week at this point. Once again, none of these measures are in and of themselves suggest that you must do something, but we need to take them all in combination to make an assessment. This is total confirmed deaths. This is fairly flat, and we are looking to see that come down. This is new cases. It was fairly flat. We're seeing a little bit of a tail coming down, but we'd like to see that continue for 14 days. That is a fairly standard measure. And then in terms of the daily COVID percent positivity rate, as I mentioned, we were higher. Our average is about 18% at this point, and our latest is 15%. And you can see that that's slowly coming down, and that's exactly, oh my God, I'm so sorry about this. You can see that this is coming down, and that's exactly the direction we want. We want to see all of these come down, and I can tell you honestly, I want nothing more than to see us get into a position where we can expand our recovery. The costs that it has, and I think Councilwoman Fiedler mentioned them most eloquently, they're meaningful, they're significant, and they have their cost as well. This is simply a representation of our aggregate percent positive. I'm going to stop here because the rest is aggregate, and what we're really looking at is how we track data. That's really what we're trying to get at. What does it look like? What does it look like over time? So we can see, are we making progress? Are we stalling out? Are we getting worse? And our real goal is that we want to use this we want to use this data to make changes. And based on what we saw, Mr. Mayor noted that there's roughly 3 different routes that counties took. We felt that we were at a position where we were kind of in that middling space. We did not feel like we needed to keep that stay-at-home order in place, as did a number of other counties, 3 counties in the city. But we also felt like we hadn't tipped over into really bending that curve downwards. We were flattening. And so that's why we made those limited changes. And the rationale behind those changes, the allowing retail as curbside, allowing 10 people in a religious institution for personal ministry, allowing 1 person at a time in the personal salon, was that we really keyed in on how do we not have people coming into these institutions, whether it's a business or a faith-based institution, and creating that churn of people that creates those contacts that we have talked about in terms of COVID. And so those activities bring the staff in, but that creates a fixed pool of people who are interacting. And our goal really is to be able to have that change in place over the next few weeks. And ideally, it takes about 4 weeks from the time we make changes to see the effects of those changes, typically 1 to 2 weeks for those changes to hold. And then 2 weeks for those changes to show up in our data. And remember, these decisions were made last week based on Tuesday, Wednesday data. So we're about a week in already. And then use that time to see what that changes and then make additional changes. Our goal is not to hold here. Our goal is to recover. And to that end, as Mr. Barron noted, the county executive announced a work group that would assess our county's recovery and would use these measures along with other inputs and would judge these measures and understand them in context to guide and inform our decisions on our path to recovery. So with that, I will turn it back to you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Madam Chair,
Pruskey.
Andrew Pruskey, District 4. I think it's important when we discuss these measures, we're transparent with the public and let them know what things do and what they don't do. And so the public needs to understand a resolution is a statement by the council. It does absolutely nothing enforcing the county executive or anything to do. So I saw some things on Facebook that were, a misnomer. So that's number 1. Number 2, I hope that folks get a chance to read the resolution because there are some things that I had questions and concerns on. And one of them was related to PPE, hospitals, other healthcare facilities, and providers. I think Dr. Kelly Rahman, you could obviously address this. We're not just worried about hospitals, healthcare providers, and other things. I'm worried about businesses. When they open, they're going to need PPE as well. Some of them are prepared, but some have not because they're waiting and seeing things. So that's something that maybe you could address. The other thing is a statement here in this resolution. It says, Anne Arundel County has sufficient testing capabilities to test for anticipated COVID-19 related illnesses. So what do we mean by that in terms of a statement? Because I know there are places that if I pay out of my own money, I can probably get a test. But I also know that a lot of insurance companies will not pay for a test unless you have certain, conditions, symptoms, so on. So obviously that's a very concerning statement to me that throughout Anne Arundel County, we have, adequate testing from that end. And maybe you could address that, Dr. Kilmiarm, when you go there. The other thing today, and I think this is tough because I agree with what's 90% in here. I mean, the statements by my colleagues, you are absolutely 100%. The heartache that you hear, as you know, I've known people that have been affected by this, that died from this. This is not something that we all just take for granted or sitting here in isolation, not knowing a business or whatever else. It's interesting because I described to someone, I had somebody send me a reopen Maryland, reopen Anne Arundel County email. The next person, I'm dealing with a grandmother who's getting kicked out of a nursing home because Medicare doesn't want to pay. So, these issues are very conflicting for all of us. I don't think anyone here is sitting here saying that, it's either this or this. And that's the concern I have. The other thing, because I think our governor's done a pretty good job, is the resolution here says to reopen Anne Arundel County. Now, there is a group called Reopen Maryland that disagrees with many of Governor Hogan's things. So I don't know if the sponsors, I know you explained what's there, but I don't know if they disagree with the governor or whatever else, from that end. So that's something. But the last thing I want to finish with is a comment. I called a doctor today at Anne Arundel Medical Center just to hear, because I often hear, well, you don't talk to the average Joe. You don't know, this guy who's unemployed, whatever else. And I asked her, I said, what's going on? And she said to me that she has been moved to work with COVID patients. ICU has been consistent at Anne Arundel Medical Center. PPE is okay, but there's always a concern because when a patient comes in, some of them stay for 2 months, a month. You just don't know depending on the condition. So you burn through PPE. So when you try and order for a hospital, you could order 1,000 masks and then might need 2,000, 3,000. I also know, because I've been reached out by several businesses that make PPE or want to get in the business. They just don't have the stock and the back orders. I don't know if any of you have been on Amazon lately. Try and get a mask. And ones that are actually good. I know people are making their own or other things, but this is not something that locally, we're seeing. So there are struggles, and Dr. Kelly Rahman actually showed some of that data. We of course we put in an order on March 13th, but when's it going to come, or how does that fit? So again, I don't have all the facts. I don't have all the answers. I agree with many things that are in there. I'm happy to serve on this task force because I want to get people open as much as I can. I'll say, and Mr. Swain got this earlier from me today. He's probably upset that I sent it to him. But we need an opinion as well about the liability of people and businesses. The last thing that I want to do is continue to open, and we're sitting here and somebody says, well, I'm going to sue this business because their people aren't wearing PPE. Or an employee says, you never provided me PPE or put conditions in. We need to answer these questions. We're not going to get an answer overnight. Mr. Swain said he would take a while to get these things answered. But if we do open, which I do, I think we need to look at consequences for businesses who aren't following the guidelines. Most people do. No question about it. They're going to try and do what's best for public health. But on top of that, we have bars that have served underage minors before. We close them for 30 days. Maybe the council's got to take a look at that. Maybe we open up more, but we also know there's some consequences for people that aren't following the law and doing what they're supposed to be doing. I was at a restaurant last week getting dinner for Mother's Day, and people weren't really social distancing. They were doing other things, and I backed away. I'm not going to want to be involved with that. But you do know that some of these things are obviously occurring, and they need to be addressed so that we have it. So again, it's serious. I think we do need to move quicker. I think some of these things will flush out soon, but I think we want to be clear on what we're saying and what we're doing. And also, we'll talk more on Friday, obviously, about the powers of the county executive, what he does, what the council does. Are the 7 of us to be prepared to make these life and death decisions for folks? It's happening already. You just need to be prepared for that and say that you're an expert. I'm asking experts. I'm trying to do the best that we can. So I hope we can continue to work together, regardless of how this goes, find a path forward, get a lot of these questions answered, and do what's best for our citizens. And I'll leave it at that if Dr. Kelly wants to add on, but thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Dr. K, did you have a response to the questions?
Yeah, a couple of questions that Councilman Pruskey noted. One is around testing. We continue to work on testing capacity. We as a county are just as constrained as the rest of the state, as the rest of the country is. Additional testing comes online. Each day there's a little bit more, but all of us are fighting for it, and so it's an incremental process. We know we're actively working on signing contracts for additional testing, working with the state. We have an order on shipment of supplies. If it doesn't get taken from us, we'll get it next week, is what we're told. And so it's these kind of uncertainties, these supply chain issues that impact both testing and PPE. And so we're hoping that we're going to get our testing to where it needs to be. And I say hoping because so much of this has been outside of the control of, frankly, almost every organization within the public health and healthcare space. We just keep fighting for it every single day. In terms of the PPE issue with businesses, I think that's a really good question. And that's something that we'll have to go and look into how we're supporting those, because in the same vein that I just talked about testing supplies, PPE supplies are very difficult to come by. We've had a purchasing officer who's literally been doing this nonstop for a couple of months now. tracking down every lead every day. I send him new leads that are, some of them are insane looking. I would throw them away in normal times. I send them to him to track down. And we continue to get more. So we'll have to look at how we can support them and what that process is. So I will take that back.
Thank you. There's a lot of, Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. To clarify the questions about the resolution and open Anne Arundel versus open Maryland, the point that I keep going back to is that this is not an open to phase 3. This is open to Governor Hogan's phase 1. And I think that the most difficult thing for the business community and faith leaders to grasp is that we have made the measures and we've made the needle move downward or flatten, all while these big box stores have been open. I mean, I have driven by the parking lots of some of these places and they are full as if nothing has changed. So I struggle with how do we let those businesses stay open, and I would challenge that perhaps not all safety measures are being met inside, but I haven't been inside, but small businesses who are at the ready are not allowed to do so. And I do want to say, if a business doesn't have the cleaning materials or the masks to properly cover their employees, or masks to offer to their folks who come into their place of business, they don't have to open. This does not force anybody to open this phase 1. And I do want to, if I could just touch on a few other notes that I took here. The census data that you showed, Dr. K, and I know this is something that you and I talked about tomorrow, the census data does not distinguish between an Anne Arundel County resident or a resident from Queen Anne's County or Talbot County or Prince George's County. And we know that one of our hospitals does get a lot of patients from those jurisdictions. And then with the 10% positivity rate and wanting to get under that, I know Dr. K, this is something else we talked about yesterday, because the initial messaging was, if you can stay at home and take care of your symptoms, do not come out for testing, only come out for testing if you absolutely want some assistance by healthcare professionals. So I question, how do we get us to a point where we're not sending the people who are most likely to test positive for testing? And you had talked about the messaging and that it takes 2 weeks to get the messaging out, that if you feel a particular way, come out for testing now, and then it takes another 2 weeks to even move the needle. So that's the 4 weeks that you're referencing, I believe.
So Nilesh Kalyanaraman, Health Officer. Thank you, Councilwoman Fiedler. A couple of points around that. So yeah, we talked about this weekend that shift in messaging, and that was really the initial messaging around limited testing was based on limited supply of tests. That was never the optimal message. And we are seeing more tests. Incidentally, today on our phone call with the state, with the Maryland Department of Health, they echoed the same thing that we talked about this weekend, is that we need to pivot to a much wider testing regimen as they're getting ready to push out their stock tests. That's really what it's about. Now that we're getting those tests, and I was really happy to hear that MDH is going to give us 500 new tests a week. Not a lot, but every little bit is going to help. We're actually going to be putting out joint messaging with MDH and with a few other counties this week to providers, to the public, to push that message. And so that's what we're doing on that front. In terms of the hospital census is really it really determines the capacity of the hospital for anybody. And so we don't really differentiate between county of origin for who's in the hospital, because if it's all Anne Arundel County residents or a mix, if there's 5 beds left, there's 5 beds left. We've actually tried to slice that data, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, we just need to know how many beds there are. So that's why we don't subdivide it by county of origin.
And you know my feelings. Oh, sorry, Amanda Fiedler, District 5, regarding small businesses versus the larger.
Sorry, I didn't mean.
And we've continued to make improvements.
I apologize to mention that one too. I didn't write fast enough. Yes, I hear you on that issue. You know, we've talked about both facets of that, both the compliance by those bigger stores, and that as much as we try to go out and do enforcement, we have to be able to see it when it happens. But we are at the ready, and we continue to do that. We continue to field calls. In fact, I got an email while we were in an earlier part of the council meeting, and I already sent it to our environmental health director. We're working on a roughly 16-hour day at this point to address those. And I understand your point about the small businesses. I think that is I'm not going to disagree with you that they're hurting right now.
In Dr. Conley, and I just want to, this is Pete Barron with the administration. I just want to echo that sentiment that we are very concerned about the impact on small businesses. And I held this up earlier just because I think it's important to recognize where the county is in relation to our neighboring jurisdictions. But what I didn't hold up was the numbers of cases as it relates to those counties. So in terms of non-essential retail that is allowed to open in Prince George's, Montgomery, Baltimore City, they're still closed. In Baltimore County, Howard County, and Frederick, they're taking a similar curbside approach. So I understand and are very sympathetic, but we have to deal with what the rules were set at the state level as to what was deemed essential and non-essential.
Thank you. Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually had a whole number of things that I wanted to raise as we, kind of had this discussion about this resolution. But Dr. Kalyana has addressed all of them, or a good number of them. I really am a strong believer that we need to let health be the guide of our decision-making here. I am enormously sympathetic to small businesses that are suffering, and especially the inequity between the treatment of small businesses and, the Target, Walmart, Home Depots in our county, that they're open and operating, with some social distancing measures in place, some being followed, some not being followed. But I also want to make sure that I give voice in this conversation to the economic impact of opening too soon. Opening too soon can invite a resurgence of this virus later that is stronger than the one we are experiencing now. It's almost like we could be undoing. We've been working really hard. We've been sacrificing a lot for 2 months now. And if we give up too early, we could be sort of undoing the work that we've done, the sacrifice that we've put in by, jumping forward too fast, too soon, when in reality, we may be within a week or 2 weeks of actually meeting all of those metrics. And I just want to reiterate, the metrics that our county is using are the metrics that the governor has been using, the metrics used by the CDC. And while we are close, we have met some of them and we are close on almost all of them. We haven't met them, and close and met are not the same thing. But with respect to the economic impact of opening too soon, I want to share a story. I won't give any specific details of the economic impact of this virus. If workers are going back, if they're going to go back into their jobs in small businesses or large businesses, and they contract the virus, we have a lot of uninsured workers in this county. Will they have any resources to, pay for the healthcare costs that they incur if they have to be hospitalized or need serious medical treatment? So that by itself can be, we know that healthcare can be one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in the United States. Are employers ready to deal with that? Do they have a way to make sure that their employees are taken care of if they contract the illness? The story that I wanted to share is a story of a mother and father with 5 children. The father is the breadwinner in the family. The mother was, taking care of the 5 children, ranging in age from infant all the way to teenager. So very young child, needing, mom the way a young baby needs mom. The father had been working in a publicly facing line of work. The father contracted COVID and the father died. The situation for this family is devastating, is financially devastating, not to mention emotionally devastating. So to sort of coin to create the conversation that the financial harm is only with one position or the other, I think is misleading. There can be great financial harm if we opened too soon. And many of the people that are at greatest risk of very substantial financial harm are already people that are very vulnerable. So as we make as we have conversations about going forward, I really hope that we keep that in mind, that opening too soon actually can have enormous financial economic repercussions for families and individuals. And obviously, we've talked a lot about the impact on small businesses, and I can't imagine what that's like. I'm not a small business owner, and I can't imagine, having to make the decision about whether I'm going to lay off my employees or how I'm going to, make my rent payment for the space that I use that I won't be able to use. So, hearing that small business owners are, taking out home equity loans to pay their employees is, just a remarkable tribute to the dedication they have to their businesses. But I think we need to just keep in mind that there is real harm to go around. The virus itself is devastating. If you've read, I'm grateful that I haven't had anyone personally close to me that's suffered from it, but I've read plenty in the news and heard stories of people telling what a horrible, horrible disease. And we talk about, what happens when people, obviously it's horrible when someone dies from it, but there can be long-term illnesses that can also be very devastating. And I think it's really important that we make sure we're not, opening unnecessary vectors. I understand the desire of people to be able to go and, reap the comfort of their faith-based, of their faith organization, of their churches, of their synagogues, of their mosques. But at the same time, experience from around the country and around the world shows that those are some of the biggest vector points. In several places around the country, one funeral has been attributed to multiple deaths in the community. One church service has been attributed to multiple deaths and illnesses in that community. And I don't want to see that happen to here in Anne Arundel County. And that's why I'm just urging enormous caution with all of these decisions. And I'm not a health expert, but we have one, and it's one that we voted for unanimously, I would like to point out. And we gave emergency authority to unanimously not very long ago. And I cannot pretend to be a health expert. I can be the voice for my constituents, but I can listen to our health expert. And I think it's really important that we stay the course and continue to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make clear for everybody sitting at home that we in this council pass legislation every single meeting on topics on which we are not experts. We routinely rely on people who are experts to come in front of us and help us understand the context of the decision making. But that's representative government. That's the form of government we have in this country. That's what it's about. And that allows us to make decisions. And if people don't like the decisions we make, that's why we have elections. And that is the government system that we've all agreed is the one we want to live by. So I don't think any of us can be expected to be health experts and can be expected to get it right 100% of the time, but we're going to try. And every single person up here is diligent and responsible and is going to talk to everybody they need to talk to in terms of figuring out when it is appropriate for us to change our status of where we are in terms of reopening the county. What I would say in terms of the emergency powers, we'll deal with that on Friday. We're going to fix that one. In terms of resolutions and being only statements, one of my colleagues mentioned something about that. I just want to make the point, words matter, resolutions matter. If they don't, then why do we do them? Why did we declare suicide a public health crisis? Because it mattered. Why did we declare last meeting that we were going to have MS Awareness Day at the end of this month? Because it matters. Because the things that this council says as a deliberative body, we are representative of the citizens in this county. Altogether, we represent everybody in this county. And so when we speak as a body, it means something. So I can understand people say it's non-binding. Sure, county executive isn't required to do it, but it does matter when we say something. I'm going to say something about numbers for a minute. You know, one of my colleagues indicated that there's 90% agreement with what's in this bill. Well, in the schools, 90% an A. That's passing. And so I would hope that with 90% agreement, we get some votes on this to get it moving forward. You know, I'm going to talk about the metrics that Dr. K brought up and went through. He showed on the screen the metrics that I'd been referring to when I talked earlier. On 6 out of those 12 metrics, it says, we don't really know. They're a toss-up. So depending on where you sit, you can check the box with an X or you can give it a green check mark. So let's assume that we give them all a green check mark. Now you've hit 9 out of 12 metrics, 75%. Again, that's a C. You're passing in school with that. So I'm not saying that we want to be reckless about this, but some of the metrics that we're looking at, we simply don't know where we are, but we can't say we're not there. And that's concerning to me because we're keeping people's businesses and people's churches closed as a result of this. And, you know, when we talk about businesses, somebody sent me a message to say something about, you know, a business has never died or a church has never died. Businesses are people. You know, a small business is somebody's dream. I don't know how many folks up here work in small businesses. I do. I've worked in small businesses pretty much since I came out of law school. I've always been in small firms. It's hard. Every day you're trying to make enough money to cover payroll. That's what it's about in small business. And so frankly, you know, this idea that like, hey, well, it's just a business. If it dies, it just dies. This is people's blood, sweat, tears, their life. It's everything they've dreamed of. And they've given so much for this. And the idea that we just casually say, well, a business has never died. Come on. And when we're talking about churches, I mean, this is people's faith. We're in a time where people are dealing with existential crises. We are trying to figure out, you know, we've got people dying from things that we can't look at, that we can't hold, that we can't touch. It's terrifying. It's frightening. People need hope. They need their faith. And frankly, the inability to be in a church with other people who are believers in a responsible way, with social distancing, with the appropriate safeguards, is a complete disservice to these people. You know, the idea, it's just so offensive to me, this idea that liquor stores are somehow essential, but churches aren't, that we're going to draw that line right there. I mean, that bothers me to my core. And I think it bothers a lot of other people too. You know, the costs of this, yes, we should absolutely look at the public health costs. We also need people looking at the economic costs. I'm glad that after we, you know, called for this resolution over the weekend and we called for this bill over the weekend, that the county executive has responded by finally putting together a work group. It wasn't like we didn't know this was coming. I mean, it wasn't like we couldn't anticipate a day where the county was going to reopen. But I'm glad in response to that pressure that there's been a decision to create a work group and there are some people in there who are going to bring other perspectives. But at the end of the day, that's an unelected work group. We are the elected representatives for this county. People are looking to us to lead. We are the leaders of this county and we need to start acting like it. You know, I would just leave it with this. We're giving a lot of money for small business loans. We're doing a lot with the food banks. I went to the food bank a few weeks ago. I made food for people. I was there helping out. You know, it's important. I've made contributions to local businesses to try to help them, to the food bank, to other places. That's important to me. and I'm sure other people have done the same thing. My point with it is, if we got people back to work, even in a responsible, reasonable way, we wouldn't need to be giving so much money away. We wouldn't need to be preventing all the evictions and foreclosures. We wouldn't need to be giving food as much because people would have the ability to go out and work and earn money and get it themselves, which is frankly what last time I checked was kind of what this country was about. So I'm struggling with a lot of what I'm hearing because I think there's a lot of people who express concern and they want to be a part of this and they want to be on top of this resolution, but they're just not quite there. And my question would be, well, then what's going to get you there?
Ms. Hare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jessica Hare, District 7. I'm hoping for a second that we can talk a little bit about some of these specifics because Mr. Barron, you mentioned sort of some of the steps that were taken in terms of the restrictions and you took this sort of medium approach. But from what I can see as a practical matter, it's still basically shut down because, for example, if we talk about the salons, one person in the salon, none of the salons that I can find are opening because it's not feasible or practical on any level to have only one person in a salon, whether it's 1,000 feet or 10,000 square feet. And so I guess my question is, Dr. K, do you see a way that we can change that? Say it's not one person per salon. Why can't we do one person per 1,000 square feet? I mean, that certainly gives you plenty of space. Chairs in a salon are often a number of feet apart anyways. Why not one every third chair? The way the order is written, someone can't bring an elderly parent or a child in because it's one person in there at a time. There are some very sort of arbitrary items that go along with it. And you and I talked about this a little bit, and I guess, do you see really so much of an increased risk allowing 5 people in a 5,000 square foot salon that you don't see allowing one person? It's just, maybe you can answer.
Nilesh Kalyanaram, Health Officer. Thank you, Councilwoman Hare. Excuse me. I think you make a really good point about the arbitrariness. One of the things that we looked at from the governor's order was how those occupancy limits were achieved, were identified, and they were identified mainly on fire code. And one of the challenges we had was that fire code has nothing to do with rate of transmission of infection, respiratory infection. It has to do with ability to get out of a building safely. And so a building with 1 door versus 2 doors would have different would have different number of maximum people, and they could have different numbers of that 50% that the governor had set. And actually, we had a lot of conversation at the state level with other health departments around this, and that we actually couldn't justify that number because it didn't make sense from infectious disease standpoint. That actually was a much more arbitrary number from our standpoint. And so we went with a mechanism that would allow some very moderate expansion of business. And I'm not suggesting that this was a large expansion by any stretch of the imagination, that limited interactions between customers. And one of our goals is to figure out a much more reasonable way to address this in terms of what is a capacity that is reasonable. And we started talking a lot about available floor space. If you had 1,000 square feet and 500 of it is occupied with shelves or aisles or whatever you had in there versus one that was fully open, how that would change it. And so we're trying to figure out actually a less arbitrary system than fire code. And that's actually something we're actively working on. So I hear you, and we will have more on that once we can get some details on that.
Thank you. Jessica Hare, District 7. Do you have a timeline for that? I mean, are we going to see that tomorrow, next week, 4 weeks? People need to feel like we're moving in the right direction and that we're getting somewhere. And my struggle with this is that, like I said, it still feels like everything's shut down. If it's a day or 2 days, that would be helpful.
I will tell you that our goal is to have that within the next 2 weeks. I mentioned that 4 weeks initially, and I want to note that we're almost a week into that as it is. We are trying to, we have the necessary challenge. The faster we go, the rougher it is. I think that was noted with the data that we produced today. In normal times, we would never produce a dashboard in 3 days, ever. It would take us months to put out a dashboard that we would stand behind. And so we're trying to move with an equivalent amount of speed and accuracy, and recognize that trade-off. And so our goal is to figure out something that's going to make sense and also to test it. That's part of this work group, is to make sure that those recommendations, let's use a personal salon, a hair salon or a barbershop as an example. What does that movement in there look like? What does the infection control look like? How does that impact it? And we also want to have some consistency across the state. If we start setting occupational standards that are different from other counties, I can assure you that there will be lots of questions and problems that come from that. So we're always trying to negotiate the state-county divide as well. But we're trying to move as fast as we can. And our goal, like I said, is to get there in 2 weeks.
And this is, sorry, go ahead, Madam Councilwoman.
I had one more follow-up, so go ahead if you wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. For the record, Pete Barron with the administration. Just to echo what Dr. K said, we thought a lot about what other jurisdictions neighboring us were doing and how that interacts. When the governor put the decision on the county instead of as a state or a regional approach, we had to move quick to give a sense, and I've pointed to that map a couple of times, but to give a sense what other counties did in Howard County, in Howard County, barbershops are the same as ours, one customer at a time. In Frederick, they are closed. In Baltimore County, they are closed. In Prince George's, they are closed. In Baltimore City, they are closed. It is trying to find that right balance of taking a cautious step forward, because as everybody has said, we want to move forward and we want to open, but to do it responsibly and safely with the science of and the expert advice of our health experts.
Thank you. Jessica Hare, District 7. So I guess one more follow-up for that for Dr. K and a comment, I suppose. Yes, we're asking that we reopen safely, but we've also heard that the numbers of one are arbitrary. And so I'm not real certain that I want to tie myself to the neighboring jurisdictions if everybody's using arbitrary numbers. I'd like to use sort of data, like we're talking about a square footage that makes sense from a transmission standpoint, how much floor space is available. And so, I think about this. I would have loved to have gone to the Painted Cottage in Edgewater to buy my mother a Mother's Day card. I couldn't. I went to Target. Right? I suffer the same question with respect to those retail establishments where there's probably 2 other people in the store the whole time and we're much more than 6 feet apart wearing masks. So Dr. K, same question with respect to the salons. Do we have a viable path to, it seems to me like opening some of these small mom and pop shops where it's maybe a husband and a wife who are working, maybe it's just one of them. It seems to me like keeping them closed for curbside, that also seems somewhat arbitrary at this juncture.
Nalash Kalyana-Raman. Thanks, Councilwoman Hare. I think that where we are is that there is some arbitrariness to that. I agree with you. Those were the guidelines put out by the governor, and they were uniform. And though they may have been arbitrary, they were also adopted, and they're also in place, and we know their effects. And that's what we are anchored to. And we don't have to stay there forever. I'm not suggesting that. But we at least know what the effects of them were to some degree. And so as we try to figure out what the next step is, we're trying to be much more methodical about what that expansion is. And I mentioned also we're trying to make sure that it has some it works across county lines. One of the things that we get hit on quite a bit is when businesses that cross county lines have different regulations in different counties, and I can assure you that we get our hands slapped real hard when we even start talking about that. So we also have to, we're also being required by the state to be mindful of that as we set those regulations as well.
Thank you.
Ms. Lacy.
Madam Chair, thank you for recognizing me. I have a bunch of different thoughts and responding to my colleagues' various comments, so these may not go in a particular order that makes the most sense, but I will try. I think it's appropriate first to say thank you to our minority colleagues for bringing the resolution. I mean, one thing about bringing a resolution is that you make the council discuss all of these topics. We've got a lot of people watching, and it's a way where we all can communicate our viewpoints. That is healthy for democracy. Saying that, the 7 of us are an especially young council. And even those of us who might not agree that they're so young, but really, we're a young council. We're, I presume, a healthy council. And we're unlikely to get killed by COVID-19 infection. Although perhaps we could if we did catch it. You know, there are certainly cases that are out there. We're sitting here in a safe virtual platform where we can't infect each other. Some of the things that we're suggesting, I think, you know, nobody's brought up, gee, maybe they should apply to us. Maybe we should actually be meeting 6 feet apart physically and, you know, bring in the public and be an experiment. We're not going to do that because our health officer wouldn't advise us to do that, would advise against it. There are lots of scientific reasons that we now know from our experience with the virus that would counsel against doing that. And I think that is the primary point, and where I have to depart from the spirit of your resolution is that it doesn't recognize that the science is telling us to stay the course. And not even necessarily for that much longer, if we would just wait and see. And another thing, I haven't heard any of you say to your constituents, wear your masks no matter what. Why don't you shut down the arguments that they're making about their constitutional right to not wear masks? Because if 80% of us wore masks, we would stop the transmission of the virus. So I'd like to see you do that. I'd like to see you stand up to your constituents who say we're infringing on their constitutional rights. Show it to me. I'll applaud you. Secondly, about the stores. I agree, but it was the governor's decision when he shut down the small businesses, and it doesn't seem fair that Walmart and Target and Home Depot and Lowe's and big box stores get to stay open. But I bet none of you have gone outside of this county into one with a higher rate of infections to shop at Target or Lowe's or Home Depot or Walmart. I bet you haven't. Why? Because we all have such a strong instinct for self-preservation. We're going to avoid it subconsciously without even thinking about it. So while we're at it, let's recognize that what's most important about our policies and this debate that we're having is that if we reopen too soon, people will die. Is that what you got elected for? I don't think so. I was very relieved and happy to hear of the county executive's decision to pull together a recovery work group. And Ms. Fiedler, I look forward to hearing how that work group is for you and what your experience is with the small businesses or with the houses of worship and working to bring everybody to be able to reopen. But if you don't keep health of our residents as the top priority, you better believe there are going to be consequences, because folks who die because we reopen too fast, that's on all of us. I don't want to sleep with that at night. I don't think you do either. I don't think the pastors do either. The ones who are pressuring us to open up their churches for their services. First of all, as a believer myself, I have to say I really question their motivations for doing that, because they're setting up situations where they will try their best, and I believe them. There's still going to be vectors of disease transmission. Maybe not next Sunday, maybe not 2 Sundays from now. They're not going to know when it's going to come, because we don't have all the testing bottlenecks solved. If we did, I'd feel differently about it. And I think the fact that several other groups, including the United Black Clergy, have said that they do not feel ready to open up for their services is a really persuasive point, especially when we know what the health inequity history is in this county. And that's why that factor has become so important to us. I'm concerned that if we reopen too quickly, this council will need to micromanage every step of the way going forward. I'm not interested in doing that. I don't think it's the right thing to do. Caution from the science says we need to, that's the whole point of why you have an executive authority who should be getting advice from us, not just us. But that's going to help better decisions be made in a more timely fashion. And we'll be revisiting that topic on Friday for sure. I think there's one other point that really struck me about the ask for opening the churches, which is no one had mentioned, what about large public attendance at funerals? And what about graduations? What about opening our playgrounds? That's the kind of micromanagement that I'm talking about, because I don't think it's fair to open that one and not open the others. And at the same time, I think there's some way that we can open some small businesses without significantly increasing the risk of disease. But I'm not in charge of it. Neither are any of us on this council. We're just simply not equipped to make those decisions. And it's not inevitable that we would have a rise in cases when we make those decisions. We just need to have spines and stay the course.
Thank you, Ms. Lacy. This is Allison Pickard, Chair, District 2. So I've waited patiently to discuss. And I also want to thank the sponsors for pulling together this resolution and echo Ms. Lacy's sentiments that it does allow us to talk openly and transparently about the issues that are churning in our heads. This is an extremely difficult time, and it's an incredibly difficult time to be in elected office. The governor last week made a decision not to move the entire state to stage 1 of his roadway to recovery. Didn't quite say the whole state's ready. And because he didn't do that, he acknowledged, to me anyways, that he recognized the 8 most populous counties were not quite where those other green counties on the map are today. And I think that's really important for us to acknowledge in Anne Arundel that we are not meeting those metrics, but we are so close. In talking, and I don't sleep very much these days, as many of you probably don't, and dealing with everything from the unemployment debacle to our small business owners to is it safe for my child to ride his bike around the block. We're all dealing with so many issues with our constituents and our own families. I'm hoping that this council, after this conversation tonight, can find a place of unity. Ms. Lacy also mentioned how young we all are, and we don't have some of the same life experiences of our elders who have seen pandemics and wars and depressions and things like that. But we we all were born and alive during 9/11. And the response of this country's leadership in response to that horrific event that really we'd never seen in this country before was so inspiring. And we're still called to be inspired by the unifying efforts of those public officials on all sides of the aisle from that time. I would like us to find that space and work with our administration and the governor and our federal elected officials to work through some of the major issues that are stopping us from really being able to acknowledge what everybody wants, and that's to get back to normal. I've had some opportunities today to talk to small businesses, the Chamber of Commerce in my area, and I know the chambers want those businesses and their members open, but they're also struggling with some very serious questions about how their businesses open safely. And the guidelines from the governor, they don't quite understand those guidelines. And now we've made these new guidelines and we have to take some time. This all came down Wednesday, Thursday. It's just Monday. And our small businesses, our big businesses, our churches really want to have safety protocols in place for not only their customers to ensure their customers have confidence in their safety, but also their employees. I've gone down a lot of different rabbit holes working through the decision that our county executive made along with the other 8 that didn't fully go to stage 1. And this issue of testing is really bothering me because while we talk about, and this resolution states that we have testing capacity, we really don't. I know some businesses in my area wanted to know how they could test their employees before they bring them back into work to say to their customers, this is a virus-free area. We don't really have that capability, and it's not necessarily because there aren't tests. There's some other regulatory issues that keep asymptomatic people from getting a test because of insurance. And Mr. Pruskey, you can't go buy yourself a test if you have $300 because you're asymptomatic and you can't prove that you've been exposed. So your insurance company is not going to cover that test. And by law, individuals can't be charged for a test. That's a problem. And then private testing companies, come to find out, are ready and willing to go to small businesses and test. But there's those insurance issues that are keeping that from happening. And if we could work together in a unified way to deal with the insurance regulations and the other lawful laws federally and everything else, we might be able to get there, but it's going to take cohesion and unity. And this resolution is to me, it's divisive. Mr. Barron mentioned the churches and the Archbishop Laurie and of Baltimore, and not every church is clamoring to open its doors. Not every citizen is emailing us to say, open, open, open. I think the social media fluttering that happened regarding both this resolution and the emergency ordinance coming for Friday's debate have brought about emails probably about 50-50 in the county. And it is upon us to work with our county executive, to work with our health officer collaboratively and our business community through this advisory group and other ways to make sure we do that. And I'm not in the business of dividing this county government so that we can't move forward collectively in a positive way. We're so close. So I will not be supporting this resolution tonight, not because I don't want our small businesses to open, not because I don't want to get my hair cut and I want my stylist to have her income back, because all those things are weighing on my heart and my head heavily. But I would like to see a unified front from this county, and I think we can get there if we stay together. Mr. Volky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. I want to be clear about something based on what the health officer has said to us. A vote against this resolution at this point is a vote for another at least 2 weeks of the current status quo, based on what we're hearing in terms of the timing for metrics and what we're going to look at potentially 3 weeks, because it sounded like it was a 4-week period. So I just want everybody to know what they're voting for and the general public to know what we're doing when we vote this way. I also would hope that Mr. Swain and the Office of Law are ready, because I would not be shocked to see some of these churches file lawsuits soon against the county as it pertains to these regulations, which again have already been struck down in other places. Pretty much everywhere it's been challenged, the state is lost. So I hope the Office of Law has the legal fees ready for that. We're in the midst of budget, so maybe we need to look at that line item to make sure we're padded sufficiently there for those costs. I want to address a point that my colleague, Ms. Lacy, mentioned, and that's the mask point. I'm with you. People should wear masks. Absolutely. It's going to cut down on transmission. Okay. Here's the reality, though. This statement of the government's going to tell me I have to wear a mask. Come on. What we're talking about here is there are people who are asking, hey, I should do it, but now you're telling me I have to do it. And there are just a certain number of people who are going to take that and say, well, I'm going to show you I'm not going to do it. But the vast majority of people are trying to wear masks. I wear one every time I go out. My wife has sewn like masks for everybody in our family. She sews them with elastic on the back and they look nice and they're out of old pillowcases and they're pretty good. And she followed some instructions online. So, we do it. And I'm just going to say that. But I think there's a distinction here. And the vast majority of people are trying to be responsible. I think there's a lot of folks who don't think that's true, but I try to look at the good in people, and I think the reality is that most people are trying to do the right thing here and try to keep other people from getting sick. There's also a question about the transmission and where you are and what you're doing and when you need to wear the mask. So again, there are some legitimate questions there, but I just want to make that point. I'm wearing masks when I go out publicly. And the last thing I want to say is this statement about, this is divisive or we're playing politics or whatever it is. I'm going to just make this very clear. If me standing up for churches having the right to assemble in a reasonable and safe way, and me and my colleagues, I should say, standing up for small businesses being allowed to open in a safe, responsible way, while liquor stores have been open this whole time, and while other, businesses have been open this whole time, if that's me playing politics, then I'm going to do it every day, all day, for the citizens of this county, because it's the right thing to do.
Ms. Fiedler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amanda Fiedler, District 5. I just want to touch on a few things. Councilwoman Rodvian told a very touching story of, I don't know if it was direct or third party, but there are people who have no choice on going to work, and I get that. This resolution, again, would only be to move to the phase that the governor has stated. And businesses, if they're not comfortable, if they feel like they don't have adequate safety measures in place, they do not have to open. They could open and have just the business owner working. If someone is not comfortable going to the store to be a consumer, they don't have to go. I do want to say I wear my mask every single time I leave. My husband does. My children do when they have to go to needed medical appointments. Everyone in District 5 should be wearing their mask. There will be people that don't listen to that, no matter what I say. But I want Councilwoman Lacy to understand that my family is following the guidelines, and I encourage everyone in my district to do the same. We touched a little bit about our council meetings and the fact that we aren't ourselves going into chambers and meeting. Just by numbers alone, we would be prohibited. 7 council members and staff were already at over 10 before you even welcome the public. Stores and local businesses would have the flexibility to have an owner and 3 patrons if that's what they chose to do. I do want to thank the administration for reaching out to me to be one of the council members on the work group. I think I have a great relationship with Dr. Kalyana Raman. We have spoken quite regularly on different issues from the first time I met him when he was looking to come to our county as our new health officer. And Councilwoman Lacy, I will bring everything that I'm hearing on the ground to the table. I do have concerns that as work groups go, they take time to first meet, they take time to put recommendations together. And I worry that that time is going to really put us in a negative place for mental health. And I keep coming back to that mental health piece because it weighs heavily on my mind. I have been involved in mental health initiatives for a very long time. And what I'm hearing on the ground really concerns me. I don't want anybody to become sick unnecessarily. That's absolutely not the case whatsoever. But I want to make sure that because we have different opinions on where we should be moving forward and how we should be moving forward, it should not divide us. And there was never an intent to divide. I just happen to believe we are at that tipping point. And I have really serious concerns about not moving forward at this point. And you cannot agree with me, and that's fine. And I'll always sit here and treat my colleagues with respect. So that's really kind of how I feel for this evening. I don't know if I'm going to have much more to say beyond that.
Hold on. Thank you, Ms. Rodvian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councilman Rodvian, District 6. I'll be really quick because I can see folks are starting to fade here a little bit. I just really want to make sure that the idea that we knock down the idea once and for all that any sort of restrictions that we put in place are simply for the protection of oneself. The way this virus works is that it is entirely possible that you have it and you do not know it, which means you are walking around as a potential biological weapon that can harm other people without knowing it. So it's not only about, I think it's helpful to have restrictions in place that provide protection for ourselves, but we are interconnected in this conversation. What one person chooses to do on one side of town impacts everyone else. And this isn't about, the government saying, oh, you have to wear a mask. This is about the government saying we're all interconnected. And I hope as we go forward with this, with this conversation and all of the different harms that can, that are being suffered, and there are plenty to go around, that we keep that in mind, that what happens over here impacts what happens over here. And that is the nature of a highly contagious virus like the one that we have. And so we can't make decisions for only individuals. We have to look at the whole picture and make sure that we're doing the best job we can to account for the needs of everyone. And in my personal opinion, we need to make sure that we are looking out for the most vulnerable and those that are least likely to put their voices into this conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from my colleagues regarding Resolution 16-20? Seeing none. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 16-20.
Mr. Pruskey?
Okay.
Ms. Fiedler? Ms.
Nay.
Rodvian? Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Ms. Lacy?
Nay.
Mr. Volky?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Resolution number 1620 is defeated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Is there any other business to be brought before the County Council at this time? Seeing none. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Lacy, so moved.
May I have a second?
Rodvian, second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? I see none. The motion carries. The County Council is adjourned until Wednesday, May 20th at 6 p.m., at which point we will hold the public budget hearing for the FY21 budget. Thank you and have a good night.